Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, a show about art, culture, politics, etc., and especially today, online personalities, all with a true right Nordic perspective, as always. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that intro. I had a bit of extra time this week to cook up something special, so hope it was worth the extra couple of minutes wait. With me, as always, I have Luddic Path. Welcome back.
Yes. So, yeah, good evening to the Euros and good afternoon to the Americans. So it's fun to be back. I think we have a bit of an interesting mix of things to talk about today. So I'm excited.
Yes, it's just a sip of the tea here. It's a topic that started as a bit of a fun side adventure, and then it, conveniently sort of coalesced with other ongoings in the online political right, I'd say.
Yes, I mean in this stream we're going to try to actually merge two topics. Moviebob, which is something that we ended up just discussing in one of these private group chats, and also trying to tie it into the Anglo Ortho phenomenon that's been going on in the DR. And I mean that's really where the Generation X part comes in. Right, but maybe we should just introduce Jay Burden as well before we do anything else.
Jay Burden back again from your last appearance was the King of the Hill episode, correct?
Yeah, it was. I really had a great time, talking with you guys, and I'm excited to be back on.
And we're excited to have you. Now, before we get going, I should be a good YouTuber and let you shill your stuff.
All right. Well, if anyone doesn't know me, I run the Jay Burden Show, which is a 2 to 3 times a week interview show where I, have interviewed Walrus and I've interviewed Luddic, as well as kind of like the other big names, in our circles of the internet. And so, if you want to come there for interviews, you can either head over to my YouTube channel, Jay Burden, my podcast, The Jay Burden Show. And then if you look up The Jay Burden Show, you can also find it as an audio-only podcast on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to, audio-only content. And that's pretty much all my shills.
All right. And for our sake, we have, I've had some issues with the description this week, so it might not be updated as I'm speaking right now. But if you're watching the recording of the stream, in the description down below should be the link to the Longhouse Element channel, which is Discord, but more secure if you want to hang out with people who are interested in our show or just, our sphere of things. There's also my Twitter, if you want to follow me there, my Instagram. And the link to the Longhouse Clips channel, where we upload segments of our podcasts there. If you don't have the time or you don't want to listen to the entire thing, you kind of just want to pick up the highlights. Luddic Path is good at cutting up and presenting some tidbits there. Now, I want to real quickly highlight falling outside the normal moral constraints. Dang it, that's hard to say. Saying for $2 American, No Nut November got Jay Burden down bad.
Okay,
Would you care to comment, sir?
Some defense here. I treat Twitter like a dumping ground for literally anything that comes into my mind. And the way that my job works is that I have roughly 3, 20-minute breaks during the day. So what happens is I open my phone, spend roughly 20 minutes, at each of these breaks shit posting, and then put my phone away. Oh no. And then completely forget about it. And what happens is I was looking at my phone just in the break room, at this video just going around, and I saw the girl in green there, and I was like, yeah, she's not like half bad looking. Put my phone away and then forgot about the tweet, only to come back to me being ratioed by my own followers, who just mercilessly mocked me. And fair enough. You know what? Fair enough. I take it back. But yeah, there's the backstory to that one.
So this is the kind of stuff you guys are missing out on if you don't follow either of us on on Twitter.
It's also funny because if you check my timeline, there are 2 tweets posted almost back to back, like 45 seconds apart from each other. And that's one of them. And then the other one is some real theory cell, like chin stroking, like pseudo intellectual bullshit. And so it's 50-50 on my profile.
It was a very out of character tweet, but I know that you're a bit of a shit poster on Twitter. But that's why I reacted to it the way that I did. I was like, there's no, you're not getting away from this one.
That's fair. Harry G-Man in chat has Jay Coomer, which I guess I deserve.
All right. Luddic Path also runs his own channel with the same name here on YouTube for some great meme content. Just following for the community tab alone is worth it, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I've been easing up a little bit on the community tab, and like people are like posting in the old community post asking me to post more stuff, but I don't know if it's the ratio or just the lack of the quality of content, but I keep just like getting less and less likes and responses on these things. So I try to maybe reformat a little bit how I do these posts. So maybe I'll just like do like by maybe like twice a week or something, and try to focus things a little bit more. So that's that. I mean, like, but yeah, No Nut November is great, specifically for these reasons, because there is, I guess there is some truth to the what do you call it, like the Frankfurt School approach, this kind of authoritarian personality, Wilhelm Reich idea that all of like the fascist energy gets bottled up if you're not jizzing.
Yeah.
So I mean, because of that, if you're able to hold on for long enough, there's stuff that's going to start to happen usually in your life that you wouldn't expect, and it could be a little bit wild sometimes. I mean, I think this is like the most successful No Nut November so far, and I've gotten into a lot of situations that I wouldn't have, like chewing out boomer employees, almost getting into fights, like evicting tenants. I've even started going back to the gym, actually. So I mean, with all of these like talks that I've talked about, how there's like no point for me to be in the gym. It's like, no, I've started going to the gym again because I just feel like it's so. It's
well, I mean,
no telekinesis yet, but
I very much got a boost of motivation after our bodybuilding stream. So I'm back as well.
Yeah, it's good. I think it helps. But I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
I can also, I don't know how to say this, at least in my experience, right? Because obviously, coming from a conservative religious background, that's not something, that you should be doing anyway. But, nonetheless, right? Like, it happens. And so I will say that, like, yeah, life finds a way. And at least for me, because this is probably, I'm on track to beat my last year's record. We're getting right around to that part of the month, or right of that part of November. And I don't know how to say this, but I just feel like incredibly alpha. Like I keep finding and it's not even in like a stupid way. I just find myself much more confrontational, and I kind of enjoy it. Like I guess this is the point that everyone gets to, where it's like if you break through the wall, you're on the other side, and you're like, wait a minute, maybe I should just do this. We'll see how it actually goes, but nonetheless, there is there's obviously the complete esoteric fit bullshit about becoming telekinetic and all that, but
Oh yeah.
there is definitely I can tell the difference.
If I was to explain it now in terms of more it's a scientific language, I think it has to do with testosterone and dopamine and the increase of testosterone and dopamine, and it just gives you a different sort of internal intuition in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done for something and how much work you're willing to do. So typically, say with confrontations and things, my sort of standard mode brain will think, okay, I'm not going to do this because it's too much work, but I don't want to die on this hill, because it's okay, then I'm going to have to sit there through the night, I have to follow this up, or I have to break my appointments and so on. But when you've gone a certain amount of time with semen retention, is you don't even think about that. Okay, it's going to be that much work, I don't even care, I'm going to do it anyway, right? That's kind of how I feel about these things, and it completely changes how you evaluate these day-to-day situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree from experience that there's something to it, right? Even though it's hard to quantify it or put your finger on it. If nothing else,
we don't want to science it up too much, right? It's just going to destroy the magic.
Right, it quickly devolves into, as you said, fit incel stuff. If you look into it too hard.
Well, there's a certain point where it actually goes back around to what the distributors said about the FTX guy, that it's not really charity if you're giving away something you don't value. Talking about how
Yeah.
incredibly celibate and how good you are at semen retention. When you're when you're an autist who never goes outside, you're kind of well, is this really a choice for you? It seems at this point this is you rationalizing the cards you've been dealt.
It's the one thing you have left that you can actually control is how much you coom. It's everything else has been taken away from you, but this thing, I'm the master of my cooming. Look at me, everyone.
It's totally a choice, guys.
Okay.
Right, but
so
yeah, just
I'm looking at our agenda here, and point number 1 is dissident right Gen X babble.
Yes.
Do you have any lead off on this?
Yeah, I'm just going to go into a little bit of a rant here. So I just wrote down a couple of bullet points because it's something that's been swirling around in my head and developing, and certain things I've written on various Telegram chats and Element chats and so on. And some of this comes from just watching the Anglo Ortho phenomenon, right? Everything from the videos to the reactions to the academic agent under the microscope video, where he has the concept of boomer truth, right? That he brings up. It's okay, now we're going to go back to defending the boomer truth values. But I felt like the boomer truth angle is pretty good, but it's not 100% apt in terms of what's being presented, I feel, by Anglo Ortho. So I wanted to create a sort of neologism here that I call the Gen Xer truth. That is, I think, is a little bit closer to what Anglo Ortho is bringing in. So, I mean, if we think about boomer truth as sort of that's the post-World War anti-fascist agenda. Everybody is equal. Everybody should have freedom. Everything should just mix into everything else. I saw one of these Alan Watts quotes earlier this week from one of these channels I follow on Facebook, where he says something well, Jesus found out that everybody's God in disguise and he was crucified for it. And it's this kind of almost pseudo-pagan ideas that everybody is divine in some sense and we're all the same and everybody should get along and so on. Okay, that's well and good. That's after World War II, after basically the mid-century Germans are defeated. But the Gen Xer truth regime comes in, I think, at the end of history, basically after the Soviets have been defeated. The Second World is gone. Now there's only the First World and the Third World. And now we sort of realize that, okay, it's everybody's not the same. There is such a thing as different cultures. There are different peoples and different ways of seeing things. And so we're a little bit more granular in our understandings. It's not just everything is just one big fuck where everybody's just going to party and do drugs. There are actually authentic cultures. But here's the big but here. What do you do with that? What do you do when you're supposed to have this one world order and you have all these different cultures that are supposed to interact with each other, and how can you approach it?
What's kind of weird though is that the Marxists had this pretty much going from day one. right? I mean, they've been hammering on about against or towards cultural relativism for quite a while.
Oh yeah, but there's cultural relativism, but there's something different to the Gen Xer truth. So let me just try to get a little bit closer to what I'm thinking about here. I would summarize the Gen Xer truth as basically the idea that you can have authenticity, which is something that is very particular for Generation X. There, you have, of course, everybody talks about how the Gen Xers are very cynical and they're atheistic, they don't believe in anything, they're nihilist. But there's also like a flip side to that, where you have the kind of Gen Xers that have this extreme kind of grasping thirst for authenticity, and you see it in a lot of, in my opinion, some of the best dissident right content creators, some like Morgoth, for instance, Millennial Vos. I think Distributist is on that spectrum. Even though he looks at himself as like an older millennial, I see him more as a Gen Xer.
Even someone
in that sense.
I mean, even someone like Academic Agent, but you have to probably follow his like second channel for
but
everything he does there is very much.
Oh yeah, but I think he's a little bit more of the nihilist brand of the Gen Xer. But like you have this sort of the other brand of the kind of always seeking the kind of authentic experience and trying to respect authenticity before anything else. Like say like the people who would chain themselves to a tree, for instance, to stop a woods from being cut down. For like some company comes in to try to cut down the Amazon, they chain themselves to the tree. They'll take the boat out to try to stop the whales from being killed, with Greenpeace and everything. There's and they try to stand up for these indigenous tribes and so on. Like it's that kind of Gen X energy, where whoops, did we lose Jay?
Whoops, I think we lost him for a moment.
Oh, okay, he can jump in later, right? But the idea then is like you can have that kind of authenticity, this sort of respect for everybody's pure cultural tribal self-expression, and you can also have order in a sense. Like you can have an order society where institutions work, the trains run on time, and there's no contradiction here. Like you can have your cake and eat it too. And how do you get that? Because typically you can have one thing where every person maintains their cultural integrity, every tribe maintains their cultural integrity, but that is in a sense chaotic politically, because it's a constant sort of conflict between these worldviews. But so to attain order, you have to kind of flatten a lot of these cultures. They have to be slightly neutered to fit in with the grander narrative. Like, I mean, let's say like 1950s America was a more sort of ordered society in the sense that the culture was a lot more flat, right? But it was ordered, it was functional. But that's where sort of a lot of the boomers come in to sort of complain that this was a fake society. It was a sort of a plastic world in a sense that needed more authenticity, and that's when they would bring in the free love and the LSD and all that kind of stuff, and then that had to be reeled in later in order to assure order,
sort of
right?
Melting pot ideal sort of Gen Xer sugarcoating society stuff. I mean, isn't that sort of the image that we're left with from the 90s?
Yes, exactly. And like this is the idea of integration, right? Because if you have these various groups, like from a political science perspective, you're sitting with various cultural groups. What can you do? One option is assimilation, right? Where you completely, like you say, you take in we take in Ethiopians into Norway, for instance, and we just completely collapse their identity. We just demand that they become Norwegian in every way. They have to forget about their identity. We marry them into with Norwegian families, and eventually they just get diluted into the culture.
Skis and get out there.
Exactly, like they're just forced to leave their identities and completely bash with the rest of the population, which I see as a sort of valid approach to doing this. The other one is segregation, where you just, I mean, it's sort of self-explanatory. We just put a big fence in between these two groups, and we use this toilet and you use the other toilet, and you could have some negotiation across the fence and some common rules as to how we do things, but we don't mix. And I mean, and the third is integration, right? And this is like the Generation X truth regime. The idea that you can somehow integrate these various cultures into each other and get something that's more than the sum of its parts, in a sense. You get both more authenticity and more order in the same vein. And this is going to lead us into some kind of promised land in terms of that's like the 90s progressive vision.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, if you want to look at something else we did where where this comes in, it's the episode that I did on gargoyles with the creator Greg Weisman. I think he represents that mode of thinking, where you have like the ancient kind of magical creatures from the castle in Scotland 1,000 years ago that are brought into like 1990s Manhattan, and they have
that
to
just meshes,
meshes into each other, and later they go on like this globe-trotting adventure, and they meet like the Aztec gargoyles who teach them about nature medicine and like the old kind of Aztec shamanistic traditions that they use for their own benefits. And then they meet like the Japanese Shinto warriors and so on, and they just keep like meshing these cultures and creating more and more like, you know, productive and cool and new things that just keeps getting better and better. And then like I feel like this is the viewpoint that Anglo Ortho is bringing forth here when he's talking about how like we don't have a political problem, we have a cultural problem, and we need to get engaged in a sort of fruitful dialogue between black and white, in a sense. Like this is the Gen Xer truth, in a sense, like my view of like this 90s delusion. Like
I mean I'm babbling a lot here, left, then everything will work out.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, these groups will, you know, integrate somehow. Like you will get it's not a zero-sum game. We keep just integrating and creating better and better things. But of course, I mean, we live in 2022, and for those of you who've been paying attention, like there's a reason that if you walk into an airport, you have to go through customs and stand right there with your legs spread to be scanned by an X-ray machine and have some Lizzo woman look at your shriveled pee-pee, right? I mean, this is because multiculturalism doesn't work. Yeah. Right? This is like the post 9/11 world. This is
multiculturalism.
Yes. I mean, this is the, you know, post grooming gang terrorist attack, you know, satellite city no-go zone, race riot world that we've lived in the last like 20 years. It is not integration working; it's integration subtracting on just every level. Right. So
what's weird is that like half the people who we'd consider our enemies, you know, want to pretend that we're still living in that in the 90s, and the other half wants to go harder. I mean, if you look at how the Democrats are constantly infighting in the US, right? Half the population there wants to like pretend that we're still in hunky dory, just, you know, shake hands and we'll get over it, while the second part just wants to kill white people, pretty much.
Yep, we just go harder on the pause.
So, if I can interject something, I have a kind of firsthand experience because my parents are core Gen Xers. They were born in '75, and my grandparents are core Boomers. They were all born in 1950. And to me, at least, the prism through which I look at, you know, Gen X and the Boomers is they're a linked generation, and obviously many of them because that's who their parents were. And in many ways, Gen X recognized the hypocrisy of the baby boomers, basically saying like, wait a minute, like you guys wanted revolution and all you did was settle into the suburbs. They recognized kind of like the inherent contradiction to the boomer truth regime. But instead of looking at that in the way that, you know, even though that you and I, you know, you and us, or even though we all, you know, span a generation gap, we also recognize the contradiction. But we say, oh, there's a contradiction, therefore the presupposition is wrong. Gen X essentially saw the contradiction and say, oh, well, you guys just weren't authentic about it. Like you had these values, but you never really lived up to them.
They accused the boomers of selling out, pretty much, right?
Exactly. And so you see all these kind of like 1960s echoes. So the music scene is an easy example. There was, you know, they redid Woodstock. You know, there was street violence. All of these things that were associated with the 1960s are also very much associated with Gen X. And the other thing I think a lot of people forget is that the origin of the term political correctness, you know, this kind of like college campus culture, like the genesis of that is in the 90s. And so in many ways, it was kind of a, you know, 1960s part two, kind of an echo of that. And so even now, because it's funny, because there's out of the midterms, one of the many things that came out, and I think that Bob Chipman even, or Moviebob even tweeted this, is that, you know, Gen X has now started to swing red. And it's interesting because despite, you know, defining themselves as a rebellion to their parents, you despite defining themselves as the anti-baby boomers, they've essentially done the exact same thing. They were radical when they were young, but after they got out of college, they hit the real world. And while they kept their cynicism, they did essentially just integrate with the system at large. And if you want to read an essay about this, Ted Kaczynski's The System's Greatest Trick, and obviously he's a baby boomer, but it was written in the mid 2000s. And he essentially describes the process by which, yesterday's radicals become, the foot soldiers of, kind of like the regime today.
And so actually, I've been listening to Jonathan Bowden talks lately, just having them on in the background while I'm doing other stuff. And there was one I listened to the other day, which was about feminism, and that seems to sort of follow the same pattern when he talked about how a lot of these like radical feminists later in life sort of turned around or recognized maybe a bit maybe through gritted teeth that whatever they were doing in their youth actually didn't really work, and now we've sort of like ruined a generation of women. Sorry, I just had a brainwave. Continue, Britton.
No, and so it's actually something that I've discussed because my dad is pretty young. He's 46, so we're pretty close, and I'm close with my grandparents as well. And I finally did have this conversation with him, where I broke it down, because to a certain extent, not only is he core Gen X in his age, he's also core Gen X in kind of his outlook. He's so incredibly, like cynical and so incredibly checked out that basically he is just transformed himself. And look, like I love my dad, like I'm good friends with him, but nonetheless, he's a globe shitter. He retired young and essentially just, travels around to different, like sheep countries to spend time there because it's something different. And I literally had this conversation with him where I'm like, look, man, like you were involved in the music scene. Like my dad was, a Pearl Jam groupie. My dad went to, all these shows. And I was like you had the spirit of rebellion, like, but it's the same one my grandparents did, same thing his parents did. They were, involved in 60s counterculture. And it's funny because like he could both recognize it, and his conclusion at the end was, well, that's just how it is. Like everyone grows up ideological. And obviously, like my point in this is I'm not trying to like red pill my parents, get them on side, but it's like he both recognized the hypocrisy in it and had no conclusion, which I just thought was interesting. And again, like I have a good relationship with my dad. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus.
Well, I think sort of kind of what you were getting at the start here, when you said that instead of looking at the presupposition of the boomers, they sort of accepted whatever they were selling, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like it was both. It was all rebellion, but it was rebellion in a regime.
It was within the framework. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it was all anger, but no sense of actually, like upsetting the apple cart, so to speak. And then you see this, and I mean, like my dad is a successful guy that, despite all of this, he, fully integrated into the system at large. And I even had this conversation because I think a lot of right-wing Zoomers find ourselves in the position of like a very odd position of being significantly to the right of our parents, which is not a position that a lot of people are prepared for culturally. Because there's kind of, and I'm sure you guys know, like there's this cultural narrative that, oh, it's the kids. They're always the crazy left-wing radicals. Yeah. Not to say that like my dad is like a, like a hardcore Democrat or anything, but it is this odd feeling where it's not a normal, I guess, and I don't mean to say normal in like a moral sense, but like a normal in like a cultural sense way to interact. But nonetheless, it's like basically my dad has become the very critique he had of the baby boomers. Like exactly. Where it's like you had all these allegedly radical views and you just became part of the system and kind of sold out. And it's fine if you sold out and you were kind of at peace with it. But if you sell out, to quote my favorite, Real Big Fish song, if you sell out, the record company, takes all your money. But then you're on the other side saying, well, I'm still a rebel. there's a part of me that just looks at it and it's like, well, okay, man, like this is self-delusion.
What are you rebelling against? Yeah.
Exactly. And to use both an analogy that's really common in our spheres and also kind of a Gen X touchstone, like you're the guy who took the blue pill, you're the guy eating steak. And it's so funny to me that, for a generation that defines itself by the Matrix, they have largely kind of missed the core critique of that film.
No, it's a really good point, actually. It's beautifully put. And but of course, this would be like the life cycle of, say, the average kind of Gen Xer who resigns into the system. But something that I wanted to touch on was say the people in our spheres that kind of have this Gen X essence to them, right? And now we're talking about people who are actually trying to actively be in revolt against the system, who were not, resigned themselves. But say just like the boomers in our spheres are, in a sense, in my opinion, kind of held back by a certain truth, right? And that, how I try to outline a little bit about the authenticity part and the integration that I think that makes them a little bit different from the boomers. Another thing that makes the Gen Xers difference is the idea of the cultural supremacy, right? And this is a term that Anglo Ortho uses in one of his videos as well, that he's a cultural supremacist. And I see this with like a lot of these people where they are almost not even interested in like the goings on of regular politics. They're kind of completely detached from it and just want to focus on culture in a sense and think that like this entire thing is going to be won or lost by good or bad culture. Is that something you recognize?
I mean, I want to add here just quickly that I wouldn't. Maybe it's weird coming from a millennial on the other side, but for the Gen Xers who basically grew up in a system that had just started sort of firing on all cylinders when it comes to sort of producing consumerism and consumerist type media and products and culture, basically, that they see everything through that lens. I mean, kind of makes sense, right? Because that's the world they've been living in.
It absolutely does, and you can't get away from that. But this is something that I'm just starting to notice more and more, I guess, as they're aging, because this is where we get to the kind of intersection between Anglo Ortho and Moviebob, right? Where you have like this kind of, both of them will basically look at culture and say that culture is the solution, although their idea of like the cultural solution to this is very different. Like whereas let's say for Anglo Ortho's perspective, it's like, jazz is like a part of the solution. Eminem is going to be a part of the solution. Like some kind of integrative, revolutionary music is going to be the solution. But for Moviebob, it's like Cape Shit and Super Mario, right? Yeah. The proliferation of these things that are going to be like a new kind of global uniting culture, and how like, the promised land can only come if the right culture is accepted, in a sense, and we're going to live or die by whether we play Super Mario platformers or like American first-person shooters. And it sounds so fucking retarded when I put it this way, but like this is Moviebob's belief, right? And
I mean,
when
in
you
so many words,
in,
as he has produced episodes, that's what he's saying at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, this is one of his big points.
So I will say, I actually have some sympathy with the sentiment, that the solution is not political. But my problem with, Anglo Ortho, and look, like I should say, I enjoyed his previous work. I'm not trying to just like relentlessly attack the guy. But my problem with that is that if you accept the premise that the solution is not political, well, to be quite honest, like, why are you back online? Because look, I know people. Yeah, exactly, right? Like I know people because a lot of my friends are what would have been called, Gen Y, which essentially is like the made up age of people who are kind of in between, millennials and Gen X, because they do have kind of a different experience of things. So they're people who are kind of now in their, their late 30s to early 40s. And so a lot of these people are kind of got sucked into, Ron Paul and other things like that. So what would have been called by like people like Rod Dreher, like crunchy cons, so basically like hip right-wing hippies in America. And so like I have a lot of like sympathy for these people. And many of them have basically told me, like, look, like, man, like, politics is pointless. And fair enough, like, I'm sympathetic to that. But what they do is congruous with that. Essentially, these are guys that, okay, they work a corporate job because they have to pay for their kids not to go to public schools, but they own land, they have farms. And so to me, if your conclusion is, politics doesn't matter, which is a position that I can kind of respect, like, disengage, just like get out of it. And to me, like, that's maybe not something I agree with, but at least it's kind of consistent and that's something I can respect. But to me, there's something kind of baffling about, taking this premise that, like, oh, it's all about culture, it's not about politics, which I might disagree with. And then concluding that, well, the solution is I will continue to make, posts about politics and care about kind of like e-drama. Like, to be honest, if Anglo Ortho, thinks what he thinks, and like, I'm not going to, say that I'm, so much wiser that I can prove him wrong. Like, look, man, like, why'd you come back?
Well, yeah, it's that's certainly. I have a post from Nordhuger here in chat, and I wanted to get through the Gen X stuff before we did this, but he's asking for a super quick rundown on the Anglo Ortho situation. The thing is that Anglo Ortho is a guy with a YouTube channel, just like us, who showed up about a year ago, something. And he participated in the American event, had a talk there, which I've heard went very well, and got in contact with a lot of the people who are on the American online dissident right. And then he disappeared for a while, and he came back, and he's been doing some streams and some yes, not debates. He's just pretty much been streaming and doing some videos on his own channel, but it's of a radically different material. And I'll be honest, like you said, you don't want to, fight with him. I don't want to fight either. But you have to, like, if Anglo Ortho is listening to this, you have to make sense for more than 5 minutes at a time. You're saying things in one sentence, and in the next sentence, you're contradicting yourself or saying something completely different. And I don't know if it's you're trying to marry something that's not marryable or what you're doing, but like, I don't understand what you're saying. Maybe I'm stupid, but I'm feeling for me, it's like either this guy is about to paradigm shift the entire political theory, or I'm stupid, or he's stupid. And I feel like if I don't understand what he's saying, then what's the point? And it doesn't seem that anyone else is understanding what he's saying. So,
well, and I think that what the kind of core thing, that the reason this is notable is someone who is, fairly prominent, not like one of the, the big, like, top tier names, but someone that kind of like was well known, disappears for, plus or minus a year. And his last appearance, to my mind, is a stream he did with the Distributist and a few other people, might have been Philos, I can't remember who else, on, what it was like being a liberal in the 2000s. And to me, I thought it was particularly insightful because I was, a child, I was growing up during this time. And so him describing the change in tone he felt during the Obama years, where kind of libs shifted from being people that he saw as being genuinely concerned to kind of this emergence of this, kind of like vindictive streak. It was a good stream. Like, I really enjoyed it. And so it's almost like, someone leaves, or someone, at one point, the last point of contact you have, you're like, okay, like, I agree with that. Like, maybe you're a little bit to the left of me, but like, we're kind of on the same page. Disappears for, the best part of a year, and then comes back and, has essentially become kind of like an IDW type centrist. And so my point is not that, like, obviously, like, you were allowed, I'm not going to stop you from being an IDW type centrist, but it's a notable change. And it's especially odd to essentially, like, if you're, plotting this out as a graph, all of a sudden, you're missing data for a ton of months, and the lines move to a radically different direction. It's on one hand, it's just,
yeah,
that's
and then
why
you show
it's
up
notable.
and expect to be treated the same way, pretty much, right? Or
Right. And I
to
think
be
the
able to
other
attack
thing,
everyone else who's been, who's got clear data points for the past year.
right. And I think the other thing is that I'm not like overly adverse to criticism. Like, I think that there are definite points of criticism to our movement and to the right wing in general. But there's another point where it's like, look, if you've been gone for 6 to 8 months or whatever, and you come back and we're essentially rehashing points that were kind of decided, by this corner of the internet effectively years ago. Like, this is essentially like where it's like a rerun of 2018 talking points. You kind of look around and you're like, well, wait a minute, like, well, if this is really what you think, like, one, how did you end up here? But like, two, what's the point of sticking around? Like, if you want...
like, why are you here to tell us that the moon landing definitely happened? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
And I think it's especially frustrating because there were many, I guess, initial premises that I was willing to hear him out on. And look, like, I realize this might be scheduled for later in the chat, but one of the things he brings up is something I actually quite agree with, that you need to, in rejecting the left, you can't either reject everything, completely like out of hand, or, and this is why it's especially frustrating because it's not particularly coherent, he makes another point, which is that you can't enter into the left's framing. And so he specifically talks about the framing of the war between the sexes. The idea that, like, oh, well, if women hate men, well, if we just hate women more, we'll win. Like, obviously that's stupid, and that's something that you see,
I agree,
echoed.
but
So
that's my point. Like, who on the dissident right, beside like some weird guy, is saying that?
Exactly. It's like, these are points that are not incorrect, but not only are they not novel, but they're not particularly in dispute. And so essentially what it came out as, and this is a series of videos of which I've watched a little more than half of. I've watched the first and the last thing he did, the thing on the moon landing, and then the thing on, race, which I think is the thing that we'll find the most objectionable. It's a lot of kind of like premises anyone would agree with, and then conclusions which are basically like basic bitch liberal conclusions. And so it comes to a point where it's like, well, what's the point of this? Like, why are you here? If you really think this, like, there is a vast network of people who agree with you. Like, if you're just a lib who the left left them, like, my brother in Christ,
there's tons of channels for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, James Lindsay's right there. He will welcome you with open arms. And like, at a certain point, it's like, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
No, I completely agree with your statements there, and I mean, I did actually watch all of his videos, and I jotted down some points in terms of like certain things I wanted to respond to. It will be nothing like what the academic agent did, but like this super detailed thing. I mean, you mentioned it previously, Jay. I mean, he did cuck us a little bit. I mean, I planned to talk about this in advance, but he, like, the moon landing thing, he covered it extremely thoroughly, right? And
who did?
Academic agent.
Oh, right.
With the under the microscope video. That was where he did a response
I know.
video.
I just missed that. I think you cut out for me for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I mean, let's see. I mean, the reason for me why I took interest in this, and like you're saying, it's sort of it's like this feeling of someone who's come in the wrong door at a conference or something. Like, you weren't supposed to be here. You're supposed to be on the other floor, right? But that's like, that in itself is not the weird part for me. Like, the reason I think this is significant is because of Dave, the distributist, who has like multiple times recommended Anglo Ortho, and he put it out on his like distributist public Telegram. He wrote comments on his videos that were positive, and he said that like we need to have these discussions. And so I didn't want to do this because I think that Anglo Ortho is particularly interesting, but really more as like a proxy of like, these are things that Dave, the distributist, want to talk about, that I sort of see him as like this kind of premier heavyweight in our spheres. So like, that's why I thought it was interesting. And I did jot down a list here. See, the moon landing episode has been thoroughly covered already, and I thought that was the best thing Anglo Ortho made. We have a lot of points of agreement there, right? I sort of agree that, people on the right with the right wing tend to go down this kind of almost Gnostic rabbit hole where you just like doubt everything and you think everything is fake. Like, you can't deal logically with reality at that point.
That is something that we have talked about indirectly multiple times on this show, right? It's not about being the most right-wing guy in the room. It's about finding sustainable right-wing, modes of thinking. And let's take the moon landing stuff specifically, because as you said, once you start doubting one thing, you doubt everything. But the correct response, in my view, to like, did we go to the moon, isn't no, it's why should I care? Why should that be a part of my worldview? Like, it doesn't matter to
Yes.
me in my right-wing mode of thinking whether we went or not, right?
And we have to pick our fights, right? I mean, what hills are worth dying on for the particular things we want to accomplish politically, and not just
which is why I think, and I feel that a lot of people are on the same page as me, not necessarily literally, but in that same ballpark, right? So when he shows up and starts lecturing us about, we totally went to the moon, guys, again, as you said, it's like he entered the wrong room.
But I think, like, again, I think this is the best video that he did, because the other ones are just way worse in that sense. I don't know, like, what other people are going to say if they do more of these under the microscope videos. But I mean, there's another YouTuber I follow, Ramsey Pauls, who has had a similar sentiment about the moon landing and so on, and like he attributes this to a kind of malaise in like the mindset of people, where they are starting to become so myopic and it's sort of introvert. I don't know the right term here, but they can't even, like, they didn't believe we went to the moon because they didn't, they don't believe we can actually do that in reality. And there's this kind of, cultural sick pessimism. But of course, I don't want to go down that tangent. This is the least, controversial video, I think. But like the second episode he did in these right-wing critiques is the "You Don't Want a Based King" video, where he goes after two ideas. He says that the government that we have is actually good. It's actually a sort of a hunky-dory solution to have a constitutional republic. And like the problem is cultural, so you shouldn't focus on political solutions. There we go back to the kind of Gen X thing. And then he talks about like how it's actually bad to have a king, because then you wouldn't have property rights and you wouldn't be able to practice religion the way that you wanted. So it's actually a good thing to have cultural pluralism and so on.
Well, and that's the thing that I want to bring up is that many of these things are, very root level liberal presuppositions, and specifically about, feminism is one, democracy is another. Believe the sources is another. And like, fair enough. Like, this is I hate to use this word, but like, this is a diverse coalition. And so I'm kind of willing to say, like, all right, like one or two of these and you can still be, part of our group. But there comes to be a certain point where it's like, well, if you disagree with everything about this group, you're not a part of the group.
Yeah,
just like, by virtue of the fact of like just basic classification. Exactly. It's like being like, yeah, so I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in God. I actually, I worship Ahura Mazda. And the whole marriage thing. Yeah, I'm polyamorous. And yeah, I really just like, but I'm a pretty committed Christian. You come to the point where it's like we can talk about the specific claims you're making. That's a separate discussion, which I'm happy to get into. But if you meet none of the criteria for that group, you're not part of the group. This is like a very basic, like, it's almost so stupid you don't have to say it, but
yes. But of course, I thought about this as well. Like, if you're going to be dissident right, there are two qualifications. First, you need to be dissident, and secondly, you need to be on the right.
Exactly.
I mean, we talked about like the negative vision of clearing them out. I think like instead of having that as like the only vision we have, I think it should be a qualifier. Like, do you want to clear them out? Yes or no? And if you say no, then you're not in. Basically, that it should be it should be like the minimum requirement of what you need.
I mean, it's so weird. You mentioned the based king one, right? And you said that property rights and free speech is good. In a vacuum, yes, sure, right? Even you could even say that's wrong, right? But let's just give him that these are good. But then his next follow-up to that is basically that, okay, if that's given as a good and you have that now, if you get like a based king, a based autocrat, a dictator, you can't guarantee that the things you think are good stick around, right? That you're going to prosper under the based autocrat. But I mean, I'm already suffering under the current system, so So what choice do
Yes.
I have? Right? Like, I mean, that's the thing that I just used that as a, like, that's just step 1 and 2 of his argument in that video. And that's something that repeats in every video. I agree with the basic, like the very basic broad suppositions that he have, and then he goes off on a completely different tangent and says something completely stupid. And I'm sitting there wondering, why am I even listening to this guy? Why is everyone so up in arms about him? And I understand why, really, because Virginius de Flandria says, why can't we debate left-wingers instead? No, because it's important to patrol our own perimeter. More than it is to attack the enemy, actually.
Well, and the other thing that's so frustrating about this is that if this were some kind of like revolutionary, argument, like, oh wow, I really hadn't thought of that. Like you're really like attacking the core tenets, but in a way that's productive. Like fair enough, right? Like if I don't have an answer for it, then that needs to be examined. But like this is stuff that Hoppe covered. Like Democracy, the God That Failed. Like these kind of basic, defenses of democracy. Like we've been pretty, at least in my opinion, right? Like we've been pretty comfortable at being firmly anti-democratic for quite a long time. It's not like these are new critiques.
No, exactly, and this is a part of his videos that I almost find, I mean, sorry to sound like I'm sort of triggered, but I find it slightly disrespectful because there's been discussions going on. We've been reading, Robert Filmer, Thomas Hobbes, Carl Schmitt, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Moldbug, and so on. There's a body of work in political science defending autocracies, basically, or monarchies, for various reasons for why they're good and why they're not good, in a sense. And like if you're going to contribute something to the DR as it stands, you're going to have to actually attack the steel man, like the actual academic work that's been done, and not attack like people on Twitter talking about the based king or whatever. So that's
it's a body of work. It's a canon, I suppose, to use a word that's sort of really strengthened over the past couple of years, and to just show up and sort of like start taking jabs without it just feels disrespectful towards that foundation.
Yes, and like the second thing with the premise is that the idea that you can't have property rights under an autocratic government. I don't know where that comes from.
That's just retarded.
You can have a constitutional monarchy. I mean, like there are autocracies in the world right now, whether it's like Russia or China or other countries where you can have property. I mean, they can take your property, but so can the current system. Like they can also expropriate your property. So it's like there's no reason why you can't have property rights. The same thing goes for like religious freedom. Typically, like an autocrat will target religious groups that they feel are a threat to them. It's not like they're going to just persecute every person who thinks differently than them. Like they don't have time for that. I mean, say in somewhere like Russia, for instance, where like Vladimir Putin is friendly with like the Russian Orthodox Church. And that's probably like the main religious group there. But you have, say, 5% of the population that's Muslim. And they're not being constantly persecuted in Russia
because they're not a rival. Not a rival castle, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you're, if the autocrat is going to do anything to persecute you, you have to actually be a threat. And so some people in like Washington having a little commune where they have like this kind of Russian Orthodox thing in the United States, it doesn't matter if it's an autocrat or whatever. This is not a threat to the system in any way, particularly if they take the approach that politics is worldly and we're just going to focus on ourselves and like being virtuous and dressing correctly and not thinking bad thoughts and so on. Every king is going to leave them alone, right? They have no interest in people like that. They pay their taxes.
Then they're not going to be able to fight back when the FBI shows up at the door.
Exactly.
Right?
So they're absolutely no threat. Yeah.
And this is baffling to me because Hoppe demolishes this myth incredibly well. He basically puts forth, and look, I'm no ANCAP, but there's a lot of good in Hoppe. And he basically puts forth this point where his primary, I guess, variable he wants to maximize is property right. So he's an ANCAP. He gets off on that. Mm-hmm. And so what he describes is basically like, look, like what is monarchy except for a system in which one person has ownership over the state? So they have a vested interest in essentially ensuring that their company turns out well because they're going to pass it on to their children. And because it is all kind of owned by one person, it actually limits the amount of overreach the government can have. Because whereas now, our governments essentially have limited or have limitless funds. You know, they can employ thousands of bureaucrats, thousands of guys with guns to ruin your life. I mean, like, if you actually look at what monarchies were really like the touch of the law was incredibly light, just because it was one
There's
guy.
a physical
He couldn't pay
limit to
for
what
everything.
you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that doesn't
And
mean
even
to
all
say
the
that
way
if
down,
you
I mean,
got,
that's the whole point of feudalism, is to separate, you know, the violence into, it's to compartmentalize the violence potential, right?
no, exactly. And it's so bizarre to me because my big point with this is I'm not mad that Anglo Ortho is bringing up objections. You know, like, that's part of the process. Like, fair enough, do it. But
I'm
like,
mad that it's bringing up retarded objections.
yes, exactly. And bringing up objections that have been handled 30 years ago, you know, by people who are essentially to the left of this group. You know, like, I would say that most of us are to the right of, you know, of Hans Hermann Hoppe. But like, this is, to me, it's also like, these aren't obscure sources. You know, like, Hoppe is cited continuously. You know, we talk about anti-democratic, like, if you want to look into this, like, to me at least, like, the videos talking about this as a new issue are 4 to 5 years old. You know, like, if you're going to inject yourself into the conversation, like, do your research is kind of my point.
Yes, it's really well put, and you don't just have theory to back this up. I mean, if you look at the last like 2 years of COVID handling, I mean, if you compare, you know, liberal democracies, the way they handled this thing to dictatorships, I mean, say like Belarus or Russia were significantly more lax on basically pushing masks in people's faces, locking people up, and all that stuff, compared to Australia, for instance, or Germany, or some of these liberal democracies that were just way worse. So I mean, simply by the fact that, you know, Putin is not really that interested in getting up in personal people's business. He's just more trying to handle geopolitical issues, and doesn't have the same kind of managerial apparatus that we have in the West, that is just you know, standing over your shoulder, trying to monitor everything you're doing. So paradoxically, I mean, you have more personal freedom, in at least in some aspects, living
Well, look,
under
man,
dictatorships.
it wasn't that bad. I don't know why everyone's complaining about it. It wasn't that bad. Like, sure, I almost got kicked out of university. Sure, you know, I you know, faced major penalties because I wouldn't get the jab. Sure, I can't get a job in multiple industries because I won't get the jab. But it wasn't that bad, man. It wasn't that bad. You're just making it up.
It's
Yeah,
unforgivable.
but I mean, then we're going into his like third episode, like the way of life, way of death, where he actually does make that claim, where just like you said, that like the COVID stuff wasn't that bad because he wasn't forced to take the vax, right? I mean, I was basically threatened, like, with my job. My wife, who was pregnant at the time, was pressured. You know, with the vaccine, I mean, we were able to get out of it because we have resources, right? And we could negotiate, and I have like leverage in my job. But I know people who lost their jobs because of this, like they refused to get jabbed, or they refused to wear masks, or like various things. A lot of these, it happened to a lot of people. So I just don't understand. Like, it's probably the most kind of like pants on head retarded take that he has. That is like, this wasn't an issue. Like, it's not something to fuss about because he wasn't affected by it. That he lives in, I think, Washington or something. That's a blue state, and he wasn't, you know, his community wasn't targeted. Which, of course, fair enough. I think that a lot of Americans got off better. They were more capable of local resistance. But if you look at Europe and Australia and these places, I mean, it was just it was a horror show. You know, it cannot be downplayed.
And I don't want to just overpower the conversation, but I'm going to quote, you know, Charlemagne on this, who I should say is currently roasting me on Twitter right now for my bad tweet today. But nonetheless, like, he had this point where he's like,
you should be.
I can't even defend myself there. And then Ends got me acting
we'll
on
chalk it
lies,
up
but
to the no Nima November.
yeah, exactly. Right. My testosterone's off the charts. But anyway, what I meant to say is, he had this video where he brought up a point where he's like, look, like, if you really consider yourself a dissident, like, this is not an option. You know, you cannot do this. And so I remember it was one of those moments where I almost was like I remember that moment incredibly well. Like, I was sitting there and it's like, oh, like, I'm going to have to do this, and I might actually have to take a hit on this. And so what happened is I was very close to graduating with my degree when the actual, like, you know, when the actual, like, enforcement came through. And basically it was like, well, all right, like, Do I really believe this? Am I going to have to actually do it? Am I going to have to do something destructive to my life? Be forced out of school, be expelled. And basically I was like, all right, like, fine, we're going to do this. And so it was kind of like, and this is a much, much tamer version of this, obviously, but like, it's like, to a certain extent, it's like, it was almost like a mock execution, where what they did is they said like, all right, we're going to kick you out. We're going to kick you out. We're going to kick you out. And then the day that they were going to kick me out, they sent an email that's saying like, all right, if you've got a religious exemption, you're good to go. And it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, like hell, it didn't affect me. Like, obviously, like, look, I was fine. I got my degree. But at the same time, like, that's a real thing. And, that willingness of people to, go right up to the line, like point the gun at your head. But it's like, oh man, they didn't pull the trigger. And it's like, well, nonetheless, I kind of resent the implication of it. And the idea that they have all that power, but it's not a big deal because they didn't actually shoot you is, I think, kind of absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're going to find very few people defending it, but I just don't think it's been discussed enough. I mean, people are talking about like the race stuff a lot more and just kind of overlooking it, because I think that's like the most grave thing that I've seen in his videos. This kind of downplaying of the COVID stuff. It's it is a little bit mind numbing. I mean, you have lefties who are still like up in arms about this stuff, right? So.
Still getting their like seventh jab or something, yeah.
Yeah, but say like these old tankies and stuff that are been going kind of hard on the kind of anti-jab thing. So I mean, we don't want to. Not spending too much time on it, but there's like two more points. It's really like the race
let's
stuff.
do the last, and then we can move into tie the thread with Moviebob.
We're going into the dinner. So I mean, like the race part as well. It's really the same as the monarchist bit. There is so much kind of research, whether it's like Steve Saylor or what's the white guy? Jared Taylor. I mean, you have Taylor, so the bell curve, whatever you want to do. There's like so much, whether it's biology, stats. Data that you can take a look at. But instead of like going to trying to refute that, he basically boils it down to like the reason that the DR has a problem with, say, certain minority groups is because you've seen videos on LiveLeak of like a black guy who's jerking off in Starbucks, right? And there's like, well, there are white people who's doing this as well. And like, I mean, there are actual arguments. There are like reasons people believe this stuff and believe that reconciliation is not possible outside of just having seen clips on Twitter, right? It's not just is sort of like gut reaction thing. There are real things that need to be tackled here. That's just kind of completely circumvented. And I mean, the problem that's sort of not just the idea that he is not willing to actually engage with the steel man, like the real literature, but he always sort of falls back to this kind of religious perspective of the free, like this kind of metaphysical free will. In a sense, what is the term? Like libertarian free will. I think that's the academic term. The idea that you have everybody just has absolute free will all the time, and then so everything has to then be brought into this very individualistic perspective that it's always coming down to individual choices. But
strange how often that appears in a generation as nihilistic as the Gen X, by the way.
But it's but I mean, I think for people like Anglo, it's like they sort of feel like the kind of consumer culture wasn't authentic enough, so it had to end with a religious conversion instead of a type of suicide, like a Kurt Cobain or something like that. But let's see, where was I? Yeah, with the free will point, is that the problem is that there's been so much work done in terms of like sociology, political science, biology, that needs to be used to kind of understand political phenomena at a large scale, because no matter how like what you talk about free will, a group of 10 people is different than one person. A group of 1,000 people is different than a group of 10, and a group of 1,000,000 people is different than 1,000 people. There are certain laws and things that you have to consider when you're dealing with like very large scales of people in terms of how to organize, how to communicate, like this is what the elite theory is about, like how to basically get power in very large systems. This is where like the Pareto principle comes in. it's not just like a question of individual will. There is like actual ways that you can scale up systems and understand how power is distributed in systems. That if you're just going to go with this free will thing, like you're just kind of disregarding it in a sense. Like you can't even have that conversation, because you can always just bring it back to some individual should have made some choice at some point that they didn't do, and therefore we need to foster a better culture to encourage better use of free will or something. And of course this is it's all well and good, but it seems more to me like what he's trying to do is be like a missionary for Russian Orthodoxy and not really a political commentator, in a sense. That's kind of seeming, that is kind of like the final impression that I'm getting here, is that he is sort of having a little bit of credentials inside of the dissident right, going out of it, spending time in the sort of Russian Orthodox ministry, coming back in as a sort of missionary character, trying to win people over. And as most modern missionaries in first world countries, being wildly unsuccessful and just completely off point on like everything. So I don't know if anyone of you have like a similar take to that.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't want to read in too much this guy's motives, because again, like he seems like a nice enough chap, and I'm not just trying to like gut him. But to me, the core of my complaint about his, his stuff on race is not only what you've brought up, because that's it's all right, but he uses this analogy that I think is fundamentally incorrect, where he starts off describing his kind of like anti-feminist quote unquote position, which is basically that like feminism sells you this anti-male position. And obviously,
oh God, I know where you're going with this. Yeah, sorry.
And obviously, you need both men and women to be on good terms for society to function, right? Like becoming unironic, like woman haters to own the libs is stupid. Fair enough. I agree with that. I think most people would. But he turns that around to say, well, much like women and men must be on the same terms. Well, that's just how races are. Like men and women are just as different as, the races are. And look, regardless of what your ultimate solution for race relations is, that's a pants on head retarded analogy. Because to be honest, like,
and it happens within like 3 sentences too.
Yes,
I don't know how he does it.
And I was sitting there and I actually scrubbed back through it. And I was like, wait a minute, he didn't go there. And he does, and I'm not misrepresenting him, but he basically likens men and women to different races. And my point is, not only is that not true, regardless of your solution for race relations, but I mean, can you name one society?
You can't equivocate those things. That's just not how it works. Can you name
one society where men and women haven't interacted?
Yeah.
No, you can't. Can you name a society where different races haven't interacted?
Yes.
Yes, you can. And that doesn't mean that they're good societies, but it does mean that your analogy doesn't work. It just falls apart. And to me, it's like, it's frustrating because I get what you mean, Luddick. And I'm realizing I'm treading a, delicate line here, being a Christian, and I'm not trying to, criticize him for that. But it does almost seem like it's almost so disconnected with this community. It's so unrelated to what's really going on that it does kind of seem like the youth pastors, walked into the college dorm, flipped the chair around backwards.
Hey kids.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey kids, so you like Tupac, like stuff like that. Like, it's just like, hello, fellow kids. And again, like, I'm not trying to impugn this guy personally. He seems like a nice enough guy. I'm sure we could get along with, I could get along with him great, but it just does seem radically disconnected.
Well, I think, it's good that the community as a whole and the big names as well have reacted the way that they do, and sort of like, the alpha wolf snapping at the upstart, because as I said, it's patrolling our own perimeter is actually more important than attacking the enemy at this point. So
yes, I mean, in relation to the comment that came up like almost half an hour ago, why not debate leftists? I mean, debate is for people within our spheres. That's the only reason we have them, to figure stuff out between ourselves. We can only have debates between people of good faith who have similar goals, who try to reach them. I mean, like debating leftists, there's absolutely no point. What do you get out of debating someone like Vosh? just gonna it's just like clout chasing and trying to out edge and outflank the other person, make them look bad. There's nothing productive that I've seen ever come out of like this kind of right wing left wing debate ever. Like,
well,
no, unless Wash does boxing, I'm not gonna watch any.
The real left wing boxer we want to see is Hassan. Come on, I want to see that.
Yeah,
Hassan.
that's true. Like my biggest wish in life is the Candyman versus Hassan. That is because if he does it, it means that Sam Hyde has literally memed a boxing fight into existence. And just as an art form, that would be amazing.
No, I completely agree with you. But I think that part of the other reason I'm interested in this is if Anglo Ortho went full lefty. Like, was it who was that guy who got de-radicalized from the alt-right a couple years ago? What was his name? I can't remember. He featured in like the NYT and a few other things. But he was,
I think
part
I remember
of like
it vaguely. Yeah.
Yeah. People like that, I'm just not interested in talking to. Like that person's clearly a sellout. But there's a part of like Anglo Ortho that like he seems like a genuine guy. Like there seems like there's actually like a productive discussion that could be had. And so like to me, this is not just like putting this guy down to put him down. It's that like, all right, if you have objections, like let's raise them. But the current ones you've raised are not really like that's not cutting it. So if you have something, go ahead. Like let's work this out. But this stuff is pretty, at least in my mind, it's a little bit, the sauce is a little bit weak.
Yeah. For real.
No cap.
no
I think that's but I think it's a nice point to end it up, and maybe we can start looking at Moviebob.
Yes, motion picture Robert. Let's see. So the first agenda item here is, how did you find Moviebob? And I'll just pull up some random pictures of him. And maybe you can do like, I mean, you seem to have the most knowledge. If you can do like a short introduction about who this person is, if there's anyone fortunate enough in the audience to not have encountered Moviebob before.
So Moviebob, like his real name is Bob Chipman. I think he was born in 1981. Yeah, so he's 41 years old now. He is a professional movie critic, professional game reviewer, extreme kind of like shitposty Twitter personality in a sense. So where would people in this fair, like if you don't know about him already, I can just start with like, where do I know him from? Some of you are probably familiar with The Escapists, right? I mean, so we're going to go back at least 10 years here in internet history and entertainment and so on, before YouTube was the way that it is now, and people were going to other sites for video content and so on. Yahtzee Croshaw is sort of a famous character. He's this Australian video game reviewer, where he still has the show that's called Zero Punctuation. That's kind of like this kind of sped up voice, cartoon character video game, like this very cynical video game reviews, like where he will just talk really fast and do very cynical reviews of video games. I mean, I thought it was funny in the beginning. It's been going for like over 10 years, so the format's getting a little worn out. But I mean, that website didn't just have Yahtzee Croshaw, it featured other talent, and one of them was Moviebob. That's his kind of nickname. Where he had a show that's called Escape to the Movies, and another show that's called the Game Overthinker. No, sorry, it was the Big Picture. Actually, those are the two shows that he had. That is like this weekly thing where he will review a movie, and he will do another sort of rant that's really more about pop culture, and that's where I knew him from. I got the impression that he is a very knowledgeable guy within that particular field. He's more or less dedicated his entire life to learning about pop culture and pop culture trivia. So he sees his entire life through that. Yeah, this is Bob Chipman and Chris Chipman. That's his brother, right? As you can see, like his brother is a little bit more mentally well adjusted than Bob Chipman is. Chris Chipman has a wife and kids, although he is a co-collaborator with Moviebob on a lot of his videos. Like
You can see it in the way
yeah.
that he's absolutely crushing that Red Bull can, by the way. Beautiful form.
See,
But
there's something else dark in this.
White
is that you
knuckling the
see
bear
that-
claw, yeah.
Yeah, is that you see from his brother that, like, all right, maybe with a few less pounds and some time in the gym, you know, there's a masculine frame in those
Yeah,
genetics. Obviously,
hiding
Moviebob has
under
the
there,
full on, you know, Bugman physiognomy, but you know, there's a you know, there's some type of masculinity buried deep under that fat.
Yeah, 1,000 years ago, these two would be, you know, the feared brother raiders or something, right?
Yeah, unironic North FC.
No, I mean, but I mean, these guys both have intellectual ambitions. I mean, they're more like this kind of wannabe bourgeois people, right? His brother is a mechanical engineer. They run a podcast together as well. I don't remember the name in particular, but you know, where Chris Chipman runs the podcast and Bob will be a guest on occasion, and he manages to be just a little bit less insane on these podcasts than he usually is. On the Game Overthinker show that Bob runs on YouTube, that where he basically does this kind of episodic, what do you call it, episodic commentary interspersed with like bad green screen action scenes and so on. I mean, he uses the help of his brother and some other people that he met working at Blockbuster to make these videos. I mean, people get the impression that like Moviebob is doing it all by himself and that he's you know, using screen effects to kind of recreate. Like they'll do action scenes where he's fighting like 10 ninjas and so on, and it looks like it's all him, but that's only because the other people who are doing the show with him are equally fat. You know, they have like the same body type, so that's why it's it looks like it's all him, which would have been even funnier. But it's just a little bit of behind the scenes trivia there. So let's see. I think I lost my train of thoughts a little bit, but perfect. Well, I mean, this guy is a bit of an interesting case study because he is just, in a sense, like in so many ways, he's completely grotesque. He's just the perfect Bugman, in a sense. He's the perfect abomination. Like if you've watched the Morgoth series of the archetypes of the left, I think he's a perfect embodiment of the abomination leftist archetype. He's the perfect Bugman archetype. I think he's really the perfect kind of political creature, and as deluded as he is, I felt like a lot of the predictions that he made and the stuff that he was into and the insanity that he gets into, it was really more of a foreshadowing of where the culture was going to go rather than him just being quirky. It seemed like, you know, the scene from the...
He has an ability to see where the wind is blowing and aligning himself with it in a way that he ensures his survival.
Yes.
Survival being that he can continue, you know, Bugman existence.
I'm thinking about like the Dark Knight scene, like with the Heath Ledger Joker, where he says, "I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve." And like with Moviebob, I feel like that's kind of what he is. He was into cape shit, you know, maybe 10, 15 years before that was cool, and he was ranting and raving about how, like, you know, multiverse Marvel movies is going to be the new global uniting culture that everybody's going to rally around. You know, all of this kind of stuff, which it is retarded now, and it seemed retarded then, but he was right. You know, the cape shit is like the new global normie culture. So he has been sort of a pioneer, you know, of the, like, this kind of blue team America in a sense. So here he's with Anita Sarkeesian, simping as usual. Powerfully deluded individual, this guy, who I mean, he has like these tweets where he's talking about, he's trying to sell himself in as like this lady killer person. Where there's this tweet where he talks about, you know, oh, my relationship to women, you know, well, I come to the grill alone, but I don't make my own plates, you know. He makes like allusions to his sex life, which of course it doesn't exist. I wouldn't be surprised if he's never like touched a woman like outside of, you know, aside from his mother. But
No Nut November champion, 40 years running.
Absolute. Well, I mean, his porn consumption is probably off the charts, right? But
fair enough.
So he's not an ass kid. He is self-described libertine. But of course, Jay Burton, you were the person who brought this up as like you've had a fascination with this guy. So I'd like to just hear your like, how did you get introduced to this guy, and how long have you been following him? And do you have a similar take on this guy as I have?
So I have like a couple bad habits, which is one that I just like. I have my own like pet lol cows, like people I just can't stop watching. And in addition to being kind of this cringe, cape shit bug man, Moviebob also has some of the most insane political opinions ever. Like he's basically like a comic book supervillain who's also a shitlib. And
Yep.
so we'll get into this, but he'll alternate between, like fangirling over the most recent Marvel property. Yeah, that's a good example. Like he's actually the basis for one of the more popular soy jacks is Bob Chipman. But he also alternates that with the most like absolutely insane, maniacal, Twitter posting, which is also just fun to watch. And so I came into Moviebob kind of in the same way. That came out wrong. I interacted with Moviebob in a similar way to a lot of you guys, where I found zero punctuation and was kind of into, as a preteen and a teenager, kind of, generic, kind of like media review. And so Moviebob was kind of this cockroach of that scene where he was not particularly good at what he does. His videos have not really evolved since the early days of the internet. They still feature like the AVGN knockoff, cringy skits and green screen, but he's kind of a much, much less talented version of that. But he's just stuck around forever. And so he's been on, a variety of different networks. Now he kind of does his own thing. And so first I came across him sincerely. It was kind of the big thing at the time. And so I'd watch his videos from time to time. But, like tastes change and, the internet kind of moved on. But Moviebob was just always there. He's kind of this like eternal figure on the internet. And so I was kind of aware of him. And then I became, aware of his, political opinions and who he was in real life. He's essentially, this guy in his, late 40s who lives in his mom's basement, unironically, and, makes videos about, childhood nostalgia, and was also like a big like anti-Gamergate guy. And to me, like, I'm just fascinated by him because he really is the quintessential bug man. Like you can see that it seems like his entire life is basically motivated by hatred of the jocks in high school. And it's so transparent that there's none of like the niceties that you'd normally see with other leftists who might have his same motivations. Like he's 100% honest. He's 100% honest about wanting to sterilize his opposition because they bullied him in high school. They shoved him into a locker. And he thinks that, he's just so smart and so intelligent. And what he does with his, alleged intelligence is, sit in his mom's basement and talk about N64 games. And so to me, at least, like, I just can't look away from this guy. It's darkly fascinating.
And that's the thing too, that I've never knew who Moviebob was before Gamergate. And not really ever since, other than, look at what this retard tweeted, right? Every now and then. So I don't have a very close relationship to him, but I am surprised at, you just Google Moviebob tweets, and if you just like photoshopped away the Bob Chipman thing, it would be like, wow, that's a base tweet, right? If you didn't know it was him who said it, you would think that sounds quite based, but he's actually talking about, killing the bullies, as you said, so that he can keep playing N64 games.
Yeah, there is this powerful layer of delusion to the guy, which it makes it really hard for me to stomach. Like you said, Jay Burden, it's maybe like a dark fascination, but for me, maybe it's just getting older. But I tried to watch some of his newer material, right? Because there was a bit of a disconnect after like Gamergate and then 2016, where he. I mean, like you say, he keeps sticking around, but I think that he's not really been in the discussion a whole lot. I think, Razor Fist made a video about him, Sargon made a video about him, and so on. And then he just kind of, he never went away. He just kept, making the same content over and over again. I keep trying to watch it, and I see how it's just going absolutely nowhere. He keeps just indulging in the same delusions. And the same vitriol is coming out, and I'm almost feeling like physically sick after watching 3 hours of it. I'm not I'm not even exaggerating. I had to like stop and just go to the bathroom for a little bit after listening to the guy, because I mean it is just straight up painful in all that it is. But like, I mean, we've seen some of his tweets now. I in preparation for this stream, I actually read his book, because he has written one book in addition to a lot of ebooks. The book is called, let's say, Super Mario 3 Brick by Brick. Let's see if you can Google that and get some images.
I'll find an image.
Yep. So, just trying to explain what exactly he has produced here. I mean, the book looks like a strategy guide on the cover, right? It's just, something you would look, if you look at this stuff in a store, you'd think, okay, this is a strategy guide for Super Mario Brothers 3, and it's absolutely not that. The book can basically be, it's split into two. It's 100 pages of his autobiography, and then there's another 100 pages where he's just describing himself playing Super Mario Brothers 3, and interspersing it with a certain certain small paragraphs about his grandmother dying. Like, that's the book. And I mean, his kind of ambition with this is that, you have books that are written like in the film world. He's also into film as well as video games, where he says that, you have books that are written about Citizen Kane, or, like these sort of high art films, like David Lynch films, trying to analyze and explain what's actually going on in these films for posterity and so on. And he wanted to, do the similar with video games. And according to him, SMB3 is like the Citizen Kane of video games. And, it was just so necessary to tell this particular story. I mean, if he had any sense in his head whatsoever, this would have been a playthrough that would have lasted 2 hours with some commentary over it, and
or a really shit video essay.
Yeah, put behind a paywall. That's what he should have done. There's absolutely no reason this needs to be a book. If you're going to write a book, you need to actually have details. It's like one of these Jordan Peterson quotes. Oh, the book is so different. It's like a Van Gogh painting. There's detail and layers upon layers. This book does not have that. It's just. It's like him talking about Super Mario Brothers 3 is the lamest thing I've ever read, to be honest. It's like watching someone, some kind of Indian who's been tasked on Fiverr or something to describe what's going on, like for some person who's blind or something, in Braille, trying to explain what's actually happening in Super Mario Brothers. That's how banal it is. But like the interesting parts is when he's talking about his life and so on, which I wish he would have gone more into detail about what actually happened. That's kind of why you write the book, right? I mean, even you put all the embarrassing stuff in there. I think there's this quote, Emile Chiron, who's this pessimistic existentialist philosopher, who said that if you're going to write a book, you should write the stuff that you're afraid to tell everyone else, or like the deepest, darkest secrets that you will not tell anyone. That's what you should put in the book, right, to make it as good as possible. But he kind of doesn't. He just kind of goes through the motions of talking about his life and how Nintendo affects his life and so on. And it's a very banal story. I was hoping for, detailed accounts of him having his head pushed into the locker rooms and down the toilets by jocks and stuff. But it's so like boring. If you could get up the Google sheet, we could read a little bit from it.
Yeah, I'll
see
read
what's
some
actually
quotes.
going on.
Jay Burden, feel free to comment whenever you have something.
I will say I did know about his book. I made the executive decision not to read it because I've heard Moviebob talk, and I know that there can be no intelligent thought come out of his written work, and so I just completely skipped that part. But I'm glad that someone actually read the book, Luddick. I think you might be in the first 10 people to read that book after him.
You showed me
his mother.
Luddick, you showed me a review on like Amazon.
Can you go on Goodreads? Can we just for the fun of it look at the 5-star reviews that he has for this book?
Sure.
That are
Goodreads,
like not suspicious.
Super Mario 3 brick by brick. Let's see here.
Totally not suspicious 5-star reviews on this book.
Let me bring that up first here. No, I don't want to do whatever that is. Let's see here.
So there's like a search filter that you can use there. It's not completely intuitive. I think if you go under rating details, you can get
Rating details, sort order.
It's next.
No,
it's next to the
here.
stars there, and then you can sort of click on if you only want the fivers, you could click on the 5.
It doesn't seem to be working.
I think there is some sort of.
I think it did it like the opposite. So now so the best ones are at the bottom or something. Nope, never mind.
No,
okay.
This is actually the organic order. But I last time I was in there, I found a way where you could actually sort the reviews.
Maybe
check
I
the
need
top.
to.
There's a drop down menu. See sort order. I believe.
Yeah.
Top.
The top of the reviews box.
Yeah.
Sort of. No, that's just newest and oldest.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, but I mean, there's so few. There's like 3 5-star reviews or something, or 17. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, let's.
Okay, here's one. I enjoyed this combination Mario history and play-by-play. It reminded me of a Let's Play, but in a book form. Yes, it's obvious a lot of time and effort went into translating the Super Mario 3 experience into text, and it's the only example of its kind that I know of. Okay. Mario Bros is excellent. Bro, this story is the best thing I have ever read. It is better than Hungry Games and 15 Shades of Grey. The writing was flawless, the story was exciting, and you were an amazing character. Thank you for this good read. I cannot wait to see more from you.
And if you click on his user, right, Barry Lawn there. So he has one review.
Has one book.
And that's what you see with a lot of these 5-star reviews here. It's like people with like one
review.
one review. So they created their account to review this book.
This book does
it's
exactly
completely
what
organic.
it says it will do in the introduction, which is essentially to be a Let's Play in book form. Yes, one review. Yeah. Okay.
Who criticizes
the book
critics?
Gets 3 starts, but there's a lot of hate for Chipman, so that's why he gave it a 5. Okay.
So, but I mean, there's a lot of that stuff going on, like with the internet critics, you know.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is sort of Rotten Tomatoes. It is basically like a sort of shitlib kind of friend-enemy meter. You know, that's what I look at it as.
Yeah.
When you see some of these movies, because Moviebob has Rotten Tomatoes as well, and you can see very clearly, like, he knows the friend-enemy distinction. He understands like what movies you have to give a top review, and you have to give a shit review. So like if it's like Black Panther or some like, you know, Afro Cape shit stuff, you have to give it like a top shelf review.
We saw that image of him giving like Rise of Skywalker. I think it was it Rise of Skywalker 8 out of 10.
Yes. And if it's like female Ghostbusters, it's like 8 out of 10. And if it's something like the film of like Hillbilly Elegy, like by J.D. Vance, that's like 2 out of 10 because it's really bad and it's like white people in it. And the Book of Eli, it's like 2 stars, even though you have.
Did you see it in his tweets as well?
Yeah.
He has an extreme hatred for like the southern lower class. Let's put it like that.
Yes. So if it's white and if it's like you know, Christian, evangelical, anything like that, he can sniff it out immediately, and he will just use whatever little power that he has to
go on the attack. Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to read from Beyond Borders?
Yeah, you can read the Unhappy Childhood. So.
Well, this is quite a bit. Okay. Stop me if you want to comment. Any of you.
Yep.
While I won't claim that I had anything close to an unhappy childhood, particularly compared to many of my friends, I wasn't having an easy time of pre-adolescence. I was, quite emphatically, a nerd in every sense of the word, save for academic excellence. I had too much of a problem with authority to be any good at schoolwork, but was still too weird and bookish to be accepted by most of my peers. Now, we talked a bit about this before the show started, Ludwig, but I found this first paragraph here extremely funny because he's basically spending a paragraph trying to say that he's not like other boys while explaining how he's just like every other boy.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, I talked to you about it previously, but there's like so much in this book that that I mean, it strikes me as being very familiar. I probably have the same amount of gameplay hours, under my belt as this guy, and I could have written my own autobiography, just like talking about the video games that I played and how they affected me and so on. But I've always tried to like bury it. I never wanted to define myself in terms of cape shit or the culture consumption, even when I was doing it for escapism, which I eventually recognized that the reason I'm sitting in and playing all these games is because my life is not going very well, right? So I'm just trying to escape. And I never wanted this to be my identity in a sense, but that's where me and Moviebob diverge, where he is just kind of completely leaning into all of the worst parts of himself and of humanity. Like it's like this complete inversion of common sense and healthy values. Everything that's kind of unhealthy is good. Everything that's, libertine, indulgent, that those are actually virtues. They're actually good things. So it's just so painful. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I mean to step on you.
No problem.
So to me, if we're going back to the broader theme of Gen X and the search for authenticity, Moviebob is really the ideal subject in the sense that he has, in his search for authenticity, basically conflated his consumption habits with who he truly is. And so for him, consumer choices, like what he uses for escapism, essentially, have become his core identity. And when you combine that with kind of, his personal politics of, like being on the right side of history, you have this toxic brew of essentially like, well, I need to be the right type of person. I need to create
his
own.
Bio-Leninism radar is tuned to perfection, and he knows exactly what to say and think to be able to stay in this sort of like consumerist bubble.
Oh, no, 100%. You've hit the nail on the head there. And when you know a little bit of his backstory, like for instance, he doesn't earn very much money. He's on government provided healthcare and he's diabetic. So essentially he requires the government to exist, for him to survive in his current form.
He knows perfectly well that, when Trump wins, quote unquote, which is why he got like crazy after Trump, it's like when we win, quote unquote, it's over for him, right?
No, 100%. And he is exactly the ideal subject. All he wants is to consume and then get excited for next product. He's medically dependent on the system. His job doesn't exist, unless this incredibly complicated, like globalized system, functions perfectly. He really is someone for whom, like, not only is he just objectively a loser, but everything in his life depends on, the system staying in control. And so, like, you're right, like his friend enemy radar is impeccable. Like, really, like if you want to look for your friends, find who Moviebob hates. It's better than you could ever be at it. But it is almost also like everything you say about like the idealized Bugman, this person who just wants to be like fat and alone and to just escape from reality, go into their little world where they can have exactly the kind of consumer products they want. Like, this is him. We found Mr. Bugman. Like there's a reason that the soy jack was modeled off this guy. He's kind of like the epitome of it. And so it's a useful way to examine that trope because, instead of being this abstract concept, it's just a real guy who exists.
It's perfectly put. And like you said, I mean, his job not existing, it's not just that his job as a film critic relies on the complex globalist infrastructure, but a film critic who wants to cover the type of stuff that he does. Because if you continue reading the quote, you'll sort of see that like he just wants to talk about the stuff he likes. He doesn't want to go out and see like, okay, what are people interested in? And I'm trying to adapt myself to the consumer demand. He just wants to talk about like his consumer stuff, so the niche is even smaller. Like, I mean, it's exceptionally small, and he's just not willing to budge on his like preferred cultural Bugman tastes or like his lifestyle or anything, but not 1 inch. And it is really like the blue America, in a sense, like Team Blue in America, that sort of guarantees him that he's going to be able to keep doing that until he dies. But yeah, Walrus, if you want to keep reading, we'll learn a little bit more about Mr. Chipman here.
Yes, I'll keep reading. Just give me a second. Here we go. Instead of dealing with this in some kind of mature fashion, I made one bad decision after another, including the classic asshole move of trying to endear myself to the cool kids by trying to join the name-calling and belittling of the other uncool kids.
You never stopped, Bob. You never stop.
A part of me will probably hate myself for that until my dying day. I should probably add that I was attending a Catholic school at the time, so all my issues came packaged alongside an inseparable religious guilt to boot, and the teachers, free from the rigors of dealing with kids with serious problems like their public school counterparts, had plenty of time to devote to fixing me. I was in the principal's office. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just
Jay?
going to say, that's a very odd complaint to have. Yeah, we didn't have any serious problems, so my teachers had tons of time to spend with me and to make me a better person. That's such a ass backwards complaint. Like, I can't believe I went to a good school where my teachers cared about me. Like, what the heck? Like, that's absurd.
Yeah, it's
Yes. And I mean, apparently they didn't do enough, right? I assume that because it's a Catholic school, I don't know, I mean, the specific year, but maybe they still had corporal punishment, right? They should have brought out the exorcists for this guy, because, I mean, he's just that far lost.
Moose Footloose as a W for urban schools. Okay, let's continue. I was in the principal's office a lot, and so were my parents. They tried therapy, but I developed an unhelpful hobby of reading about child psychiatry techniques and then either purposefully subverting them or smugly informing the therapist that I knew why he was doing what he was doing. I even had an EKG, which at least required me to stay up all night beforehand watching Nick at Night and playing Nintendo, so there was that. I think that's very interesting that, once his lifestyle is threatened, then he's smart enough, apparently, to read about these things in order to sort of preserve himself. But he said he wasn't academically excellent, right? So it's not that he's like, I'm not calling him super smart, but he's smart enough, right? To fit into the midwit.
He really is like the true midwit. Like, obviously he's not a complete moron. He has retarded takes, but he writes enough. He can write technically cogent English sentences. So he's not like a literal retard. But whatever intelligence he has,
or he's just lying about this.
That's another significant possibility. But it truly does strike at the heart of the midwit, right? Because obviously the midwit is referring to IQ, but there's no direct correlation between being 115 IQ and being a midwit. Like, there are plenty of people who are incredibly intelligent and yet are midwits. Like, it really has to do with that. Like, well, what do you use your intelligence for? And if you use it for just like mindlessly affirming the kind of like the system which is in power, using whatever intelligence you have to essentially like lean into, like the existing control system, it's like exactly what he's done. It's like, well, I mean, you just did it, and so like, this is again why I find Bob Chipman fascinating. Like, part of it's just the unhinged nature, but another part of it is that like everything we say about the left, Bob Chipman embodies. He is like the primordial libtard.
Yeah, he's like a super set, like the Ur characterization of everything.
Well, and it's part of the reason that I just, with no commentary, will retweet Moviebob, because he says things and it's like, I can't add any commentary to this. You just said it, and there are things like that, like much like you said, like he uses whatever kind of like cunning he has to just like feed his desire to live in a pod, essentially, to play video games all night, to never do anything.
Yeah. Do you have any comments before I read on, Luddick?
Nah, I think Jay Burton summed it up very well.
All right, we'll do the last bit. They recommended Ritalin and other mind-altering drugs, but my parents said no. I thanked them at least once a month for that, sometimes more. And amid all that, the most reliable escape I had was almost always Mario. While I could get bored with even my favorite movies or books after a while, the games were always a little bit different every time I played. So I played them and watched the cartoons. and read the comics and the magazines, and filled my notebooks and sketch pads and the margins of my textbooks with Mario drawings. And I felt my ears perk up when the rumors began to swirl of Super Mario Bros. 3.
So I mean, I'm wondering here, like, why he is like anti-Ritalin, like from his perspective, why he thinks that's a kind of bad thing to be doing, when the alternative is that he's just going to do escapism into these consumer products instead, right? I mean, I can understand why, but let's say you give kids Ritalin. I mean, what's his argument against that? Is he against like the expert consensus on drugs? I mean, I doubt it, right?
I
So
would assume not, right?
yeah, maybe there's like some little bit of sincerity coming through here, through all the bullshit.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because it's weird. This guy has very much the view of like, you know, a eugenicist society optimizer, and for him to be against giving Ritalin to kids in school is kind of strange.
Exactly. So the next quote we should look at is like, if you look at Bob the Cool Kid, that's the header under A Boy Goes to War.
All right. Should I just read it?
Yes.
Bob the Cool Kid. But whatever. It was the 90s. Video games had arrived as the coolest ticket in popular culture. The arcades were in the midst of a brand new boom, driven largely by a new generation of more violent games aimed at teenagers. Mario and Nintendo were the acknowledged kings of video games, and Bob Chipman, formerly Bob the Dork, who's way too into Super Mario Bros. 3 brick by brick 30s. Oh, what's this?
No, so
Brick
it's a
by
sloppy
brick
by me.
36.
Just
Formerly Bob the Dork, who's way too into Super Mario Bros. 3, his dorky video games, was now Bob the guy who knows everything about the world's hottest new pastime. Why, yes, ma'am, I can tell you the best place to build up your EXP in Final Fantasy. What's that, sir? You can't quite make it through Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2? Let me show you a code that might help. Pathetic fantasies, even for a 10-year-old, but that's really how I figured things were going. Hell, maybe that's how they were just for a moment. But that moment, my moment, didn't last. Having had female friends who's worked at GameStop, this sentence here is not unusual. This has been used many times in real life.
No, it's perfect, but this is like another like slightly, you know, vulnerable moment, whether he knows it or not. Leading up to this paragraph, he sits and talks about how he was, you know, one of the first people to get into like video games before it became mainstream. So he was a loser because he was, you know, a nerd that was just like way too into it, and then like the stuff that he was into became mainstream, and he got like a real kick out of it because now he was the expert. Like he was sort of like top dog for being expert at this particular thing. And the stuff that broke his streak is basically like, you know, Mortal Kombat or like
Doom. The dude bro gamers.
Yeah, like when you get like the sort of dude bro teenage extreme stuff, like this kind of violent stuff that's like it's not as hugboxy as he would have wanted. You know, he prefers the kind of cozy Nintendo kid stuff to forget about life. Basically, he doesn't want to
bing bing wahoos. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, anybody who is quote unquote a video game nerd, I mean, just start playing Mortal Kombat. There's, you know, you can just adapt and learn that game and be the man, you know, and who knows the most about Mortal Kombat. If you're a geek already and you understand game mechanics, there's no reason why you couldn't do that and just keep being on top. But like, this is like his insistence to, he wants not just to not change his lifestyle, but he wants to remain within his like particular little niche of that lifestyle and not budge an inch to adapt to even the people within the broader video game sphere. Like he only wants to talk about like this kind of side-scrolling platformy Super Mario Brother stuff. Like that's the only thing that he wants to talk about. He does not want to talk about fighting games or shooters or strategy or anything like that. It's just like pure escapism into, you know, escaping my bad childhood stuff, and that's the only thing that I want to do. So it's quite it's quite fascinating in terms of like his psychology. I mean, there are some other funny quotes here that I just added in here about like his use of language. If you look at the personal Vietnam
I gotta
quotes,
read personal Vietnam. In my memories, the great console wars dragged on like my own private Vietnam, and it didn't help that I was still constantly in trouble at school and in and out of therapy at the time for anger, attention, and authority issues. However, it really only lasted a couple of years.
So, I mean, he keeps using this type of language throughout the book.
There's no way. I don't know how it was in the U.S., but I mean, the Great Console Wars, quote unquote, it can't have been that big of a deal to affect anyone in real life in any way, shape, or form, right?
But this is how trivial he is, right? I mean, I really hope that there's like more to his life than this stuff. If this is the only bad thing that happened to him, then it's like it makes him even more pathetic than he already is. I mean, there has to be some abuse in there, like that.
Like he might be writing this a bit tongue in cheek, right? But there's got to be something else to write about, Bob. As you said, there has to be like some dirty stuff.
Exactly, but he keeps using this language like Private Vietnam, 9/11. I talked about Super Mario. The reveal of Super Mario Brothers 3 was like his own 9/11, and this is his personal Vietnam. Like this language of how like these super trivial consumer things that he compares to like this bigger cultural moment in a sense. Like it is like this thirst for authenticity, but it's just like this pure fake simulated world in a sense that he thinks he can sort of relive great things through his own little consumer bubble.
Yeah.
Let's see what else is in.
Unserious Super Mario lore.
So unserious Super Mario lore. This is perfect actually. Yeah, read this one.
Okay, let's do this. Mario and Luigi were born in the Mushroom Kingdom. That doesn't make any sense. How'd they grow up in Brooklyn then? Were they sent at some point like Superman, unaware of their own real origins? Is this in regard to like that old TV show?
Yes, I mean this is for some context here. He worships Super Mario, right? And one of the reasons that he talks about Super Mario as like being like this religious experience for him, and one of the reasons it's so significant is that it's revealed in the first Super Mario lore that Super Mario is Italian American, just like Moviebob. So that's like the definitive selling point. He's not just fat, right? But he's also of the same ethnic group that Moviebob is. So it's like that's why I made the meme. This kind of like my ancestor.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you have it. Maybe you can show it.
That image afterwards. Yeah,
pull it up there. So he is like the Lord and Savior Super Mario, basically, until there's more products that are coming out about Super Mario that elaborate more on the lore, where the lore changes. I think that's in let's say like Yoshi's Island or something, where you see that like Mario actually grows up. Yes, I mean this is like unironically his view on Super Mario, just to sort of understand the significance and why he keeps going back to it over and over again. But if you go back to the quote sheet, he let's see, he says that. So I think it's the unserious lore one. It's let's see, Yoshi's Island comes out, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show comes out. There's a lot of lore that basically says that he was actually born in the Mushroom Kingdom, but then that puts into question his status as an Italian American, right? And then like this is like a large existential crisis in Moviebob's life as a child, right? Because like his Lord and Savior Super Mario wasn't actually Italian American, and then he starts to blame like Shigeru Miyamoto and these Japanese people for not actually being consistent with the lore, and like they're not taking it as seriously as he's taking it, and that's like this big problem for him. But let him speak for himself.
Remind you that this guy gave the latest Star Wars movie an 8 out of 10. Okay. Mario and Luigi were born in the Mushroom Kingdom. That doesn't make any sense. How did they grow up in Brooklyn then? Were they sent there at some point like Superman, unaware of their real origins? And how were they Italian Americans if they came from a world with no Italy and no America? Ooh, maybe that'll be the plot of the next game. Maybe I didn't have a breakdown or anything. It's not as though I was knocked into some kind of system shock over this. But the dissonance stuck with me for a while. By now, I had more important things to worry about in school and life to be completely consumed by this. College prep classes, girls, sex, drugs, and social hierarchy were giving me headaches. High school, after all.
I'm gonna press X to doubt on the how much just
The
I'm
drugs or
having
the
so much
sex?
sex I can't I just can't cope with it. If you look like Bob
I
Pittman.
couldn't deal with this new Super Mario lore because I'm too busy having sex.
I'm just having so much. I mean, right, guys? Like you have so much sex, you just can't deal with Super Mario. Oops, you're
All
like
the sex
sand.
is giving me a headache, guys. Come on. Come on.
Like I
Come
always think
on,
of
yeah.
that scene, and it's a stupid comedy movie, but in that 40-year-old virgin scene or virgin movie where they make Steve Carell describe what breasts feel like, and he's like, oh, they feel like bags of sand, and
Yeah.
that's very much what Moviebob seems to be doing. Like, oh yeah, hello fellow sex havers, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Just like slipping that in there.
Okay. If I'd learned to keep my Nintendo worship relatively in check in the Sega is cooler days, I could hold it back for the age of everything but PlayStation is for kids. Mario games had been my thing, my refuge from everything else when I needed them. Now that refuge was tinged ever so slightly with doubt. It wasn't that Not from Brooklyn changed anything fundamental, but it felt so cavalier. That it wasn't presented as a surprise drove home the reminder that most of what Generation NES considered canon for its games was often just hastily composed fall mythos for US ad copy. And part of the story I'd been devoted to might have just been a narrative placeholder for Nintendo. That Shigeru Miyamoto, huh?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like these Japanese people don't really give a shit about your Italian American creed. They're just creating, their own form of goislop in terms of software.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any more comments on it, but yeah,
Robert, two bombs weren't enough, Chipman.
Yes. At one point, it's going to have to come to that, right?
Worse than
Wait. Read the the first line under Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, I'm just gonna read everything. All right.
Sorry, this is killing.
Meanwhile, my second blockbuster job led me to what seemed at the time like a stroke of great fortune.
The
An
fact that
older
there
gentleman.
are two is incredibly funny to me. Like either he got fired and then brought back, or he's like, I quit. I'm getting a real job. And then ended up working at Blockbuster Video again. Like the fact
that's kind of what happened actually. Yeah.
Yeah, was it at the same place?
No, it was at two different places. So
right.
he tried to quit to do something else. I don't remember in particular.
And then he came back. Okay.
Yep.
Meanwhile, my second blockbuster job led me to what seemed at the time like a stroke of great fortune. An older gentleman, who will remain nameless, came in asking if he could leave some flyers. Turns out he was starting up a film criticism show for local cable access television and was looking for on-air talent. Star Policy said I had to tell him no, but it said nothing about me volunteering for this position myself. After a set of meetings and conversations, I was hired to do the show along with this person and a female co-host. The resulting show was what you'd expect from local cable, but it was exposure and a chance to work on my craft, such as it was. I was the colorful member of the team, the younger guy with the wild opinions and the deeper film knowledge. It was a fun time while it lasted.
If you just pause it a little bit, I really tried to find like some footage of this stuff. It would have been great if somebody has that or can dig that up, because there's apparently some local cable show that's been run where Moviebob is like this regular guest. And I assume that he doesn't come across as cool as he makes it sound here. But it would have been great to if
I'm
that's
sure
possible to locate.
If Kiwi Farms hadn't been bonked as many times as it has, it will still be around. Someone probably has it. Okay. I'd never gotten much of a sense that anything was especially off about the guy running the show. I knew he was fairly conservative politically. Wow, red flag, guys, red flag. He was an ex-military and an ex-cop. but it had never come up in any kind of negative way. But upon the release of Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ and the controversy surrounding it, something seemed to change in him. I was fairly certain both co-hosts knew that I'd seen the film and hadn't cared for it, and expected it would make a good show when we sat down to review it. Instead, I got a phone call and an unnervingly scary life experience. My employer, though for the record I wasn't technically being paid for my services on the show, summoned me to a meeting in his van in an empty parking lot early in the morning. He did freelance security work, or he said he did at least, and was on the job. This set off more red flags than I could count, but I showed up to meet him. He presented me with a printout of a scathing blog review I'd posted after seeing the film the first time, and wanted to know what I had against Jesus Christ. Unwisely, I offered that my objection was to the anti-Semitism in the film and was told that those people had Schindler's List. Now it's our turn.
Based. I like to imagine.
Nice.
So look, like obviously, this story didn't happen, or if it did happen. It did not happen like this. But the picture he's painting is hilarious. This like schlubby guy working like unlicensed security detail is so enraged by this blog post. He brings him in and he's like, "What's your problem with Jesus?"
Those people had Schindler's List.
Yeah,
Now it's our
exactly.
turn.
This book is great. I can't believe I didn't read this. I might have to check this out.
You could just hear the Hans Zimmer score in the background. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of crap with the little pony inside, So you're getting the best stuff on this this sheet. Most of it is just super boring.
Yeah. Okay. I was then told that he would be using the passion discussion as an occasion to promote the film's positive message, and that if I wouldn't go along by saying that I liked the movie, my time on the show would be over. And that was that. I never heard from the guy again, but I know his show didn't last long without me. He told me he'd behaved in a manner...
This is literally the "Say Christ is Lord" meme. He literally brings Moviebob out to his shed, and he's like, "Say it! Say it! If not, you can't stay in this public access TV show." But nonetheless, this is great.
I'm told he'd behaved in a manner, because it's hearsay and I won't get into specifics, that disturbed the production staff during the taping of the Passion episode, and that my name had come up, which had me walking around more than a little paranoid for a few weeks, but nothing ever came of it, sorry. Oh, great. Some good stuff in here, yeah. Falling outside the normal moral constraints every time. $5 says, I won't get to finish the stream till tomorrow. Just wanted to say thanks for another great chat. Burden is the best guest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, it would have been interesting to get the host's take on this. I mean, if he is somewhere, just to get like his version of what actually happened there.
That would be amazing.
I mean, for a lot of people in this book, it would have been great to just hear them explain it. I'm sure some details.
I had him come over to my car, and I made him say Christ is Lord.
So I don't assume what we see like a private detective or something. Then so he's like just has the job of like spying on husbands who are cheating on their wives or something, and then during that he just brings in Moviebob in his car.
Well, just make him. This framed like a film. There's some like schlubby ex-cop who's in like a gross van, with a TV camera in the back. And out the back window we see this like, this aging businessman, like having sex with a secretary, while in the foreground he's just yelling at young Bob Chipman to say that he likes Passion of the Christ. It's just such an absurd situation.
God damn it, Bob, they had Schindler's List.
It's our turn. It's our turn now. They never apologized for what they did to Jesus.
It's better. It's almost as good as MAGA country.
Oh yeah.
But read this one as well. I mean, he has like a particular gripe with like like I told you before, the FPS
gaming
people,
community.
Like this is what he sees as like the biggest problem.
The dude bros, yeah.
Because it's so like not only in like the gameplay, but in terms of his like yes, in terms of like Moviebob's globalist 90s authentic integration vision, Super Mario is like the success story. That's the integration. It's like the American and the Japanese culture getting together to create something new and fresh that's going to inspire, the future to moving forward and so on. Whereas like after 9/11, not only are people playing more FPSs, but they're American produced, and it's like games where you're basically shooting at America's enemies. So it's no longer a sort of culturally inclusive space in a sense. It's really more like what he sees as like these sort of killing simulators for America's enemies. So
Do
that we
you
can
know
get into.
what does Cinema Roberto think of Metal Gear Solid?
I've never heard him bring it up actually.
So I will say this is a really stupid thought, but pre N64 era, what actually is the difference between Mario and Luigi? Like really, like in the actual games? Quite literally, it's just color. That's the only thing that's actually different.
Yeah,
about
unless
the
they
two
did
of them.
something in like Super Mario Bros. 3, but I
No,
don't quite
I mean,
remember
having
any
read this book,
difference.
I can answer the question. In Super Mario Brothers 1, it's just like just got a color palette swap, right? But in
Yeah,
Super Mario
that's what I
Brothers
think I'm talking about.
2,
Yeah, I guess
they,
you're right.
they in Super Mario Brothers 2, that's actually like a different game that they had to just retcon to use the Super Mario license. They had like Mario as like a smaller character, and then Luigi is taller, right? And he can jump higher. And if you played Super Mario Brothers 2, like when you can start to pick up these radishes and dig in the ground, and like Princess Peach can fly with her dress and so on. Like Luigi has like a higher jump, and he is taller in that game, so they have like slightly different build and skills.
Okay, thank you for breaking that down in Zoomer terms, because I think the first time I encountered Mario was
Luigi has a
Super
higher
Smash
skill
Brothers
ceiling than
Brawl.
Mario. Okay, in 2008, I was spending a lot of time online, re-engaged with a gaming community that in many ways not only didn't resemble the one I recalled, but seemed openly hostile to it. A mirror image that hated its own original subject. The feeling of inclusiveness that I remembered, perhaps in rose-colored exaggeration, born from gaming culture and nerd culture having originated as one and the same, and thus sympathetic to misfits and the socially oppressed, had been replaced by a culture of bullying. A crude, cruel horde dedicated to shunning not only the old iconography of gaming, but any attempt to build a new one beyond the borders of the online multiplayer military shooter culture that had come to dominate. Whereas I'd recalled a culture that flaunted its own pseudo-multiculturalism given the sheer volume of the medium that came from the alien culture of Japan. Interesting that he tags it as pseudo-multiculturalism here. Alien culture of Japan. I now found a rabidly xenophobic culture that would not only happily purge the weird Eastern influences of the past, but also resisted the injection of any perspective that didn't align with that of a white, heterosexual, middle-class male. I was told in feverish, excited terms that gaming had matured, but from my perspective, it had merely aged. And even then, only into adolescence. The childlike, and yes, occasionally childish innocence of gamer culture I remembered had morphed into the persona of an ignorant, hormone-fueled, id-driven teenage boy, violently resentful of women, fiercely protective of privilege, eager to prove machismo, and utterly contemptible. Of course, this culture despised the we, representing as it did a fusion of all that they sought not to be, a group activity where they cultivated detachment, colorful and exuberant, where they priced darkness and edginess, and inherently foreign. It was easily the most proudly Japanese feeling trend American families had happily adopted since the suburban koi pond, where they'd come to worship the digital age version of American muscle. Some of these sentences are very strange to read.
Yeah, it's not edited, I think, by
Yeah.
anybody. I mean, like, the editor would probably have told him to not write the book at all. But
What is very
like you
strange
said,
is how, as someone who, I mean, as a millennial, I suppose video games was a part of me growing up as well. But I, at least early on, had a lot more influence of older games through my father and his computer. So it's weird that he sees as sort of like the birth of the video game is like Super Mario, and that the next evolutionary step of it has been the shooter game, right? The military shooter in the mid 2000s, where like if you want mature games, I mean, you can play Daggerfall.
Well, right. Like there
That's
was a
for
lot of
adults.
ground covered.
Right?
Like to me, at least. And look, like like I said in chat, I had a weird path where I didn't play video games at all, until I was kind of midway through middle school, and so I kind of came to the whole thing late. But like when I think of the game, like there's a lot of ground between Super Mario Brothers 3 and Call of Duty. Like you were saying, like there's the whole immersive sim thing, there's the whole like CRPG trend, like both genres I really enjoy. And like if you're looking for quote unquote like mature games, like basically you can just read all day in a game. Like if you really wanted to. And look, like I'm not like the biggest like, gamer, quote unquote, as an identity, but like it is a weird construction that in his mind, that was just an off on switch. Like there was no transition between the two.
Yeah. And at the same time, like he's talking 2008. I think something like Demon's Souls was released in 2008, which would really put a dent in Moviebob's perspective, considering that's a Japanese game made with explicitly Western iconography.
Yes, and I mean, yeah, there's the thing that I mentioned previously, that he is not willing to move outside of his kind of hug box of what he likes with, through his childhood experience of escapism in the Super Mario Brothers. But there's another thing to take into consideration, is that he sucks. And I mean, I don't try to say
Like,
this, as
he's
being
bad
mean,
at
but
video games.
he's bad at video games. Yeah, I mean, and I know this because he, like in the other part of the book where he, describes playing through Super Mario Brothers 3, he basically, it's written like a journal, so he puts the dates when he plays these various levels, right? And he takes over a month to complete the game. He boots it up at like this old NES machine that's at his grandmother's house, and because of the NES doesn't have save state, you have to just keep it on the whole time, or you can use these kind of cheat codes to get where you were. But he uses 1 month to finish the game. And I mean, there are like regular walkthroughs of that game that takes 2 hours on YouTube. It's not speed runs. It's like someone who's just like focused trying to play through the game, especially if you have experience with platformers and so on. I think maybe 2 hours is a little bit short, but if you are like a sort of veteran gamer, quote unquote, and you're familiar and comfortable with platformers, I think you should be able to knock this out in like 8 to 12 hours if you're focused.
Any veteran gamers in the chat?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it sounds stupid saying that, but I think it is a proper perspective on as compared to someone who's never played a game, for instance. Of course, it would have made more sense to spend a month trying to beat it, but he actually spends a month. I think a reason for it is that he gets liquored. He gets drunk before he does these playthroughs, right? And so with every entry, he just sort of describes how much he's had to drink, before he starts playing. So yes,
Especially considering the Dark Souls thing.
But I mean, if you have played the game as a child and you come back as an adult, you should be able to finish it off reasonably fast. But he just isn't. He is. I don't know what it is like with video game reviewers being dog shit at games, like with that Cuphead video with the guy who can't like do the double jump or something. It was very popular for a period of time, but like with Moviebob, it's the same. He's just not completely seemed uncoordinated and unable to focus. So for him to play something like Dark Souls, I mean, forget about it. He would have taken like 5 years or something to complete it.
Well, and this ties into our earlier topic of of Anglo Ortho, which is like if you don't like what you're interacting with, you don't have to interact with it. Like if you're not good at games, you're not good at beating games quickly.
Everyone else has to change, Burden.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like surely I'm not at fault. It's the kids these days. And that's very much what it is, where it's like, look, it's not like we live in a rigidly enforced like caste-based society. Like there's no one is born into, video games journalism. That is a choice you made. Like go somewhere else. If you don't like the culture, just go somewhere else. You are not the like essential part of culture. It's incredibly irritating to me.
But I mean, there's something perfectly kind of elite theory pilled about Moviebob in this sense, because he doesn't care what the people think. He's completely anti-populist, right? And intolerant. Like you talk about like the intolerant minority, the intolerant organized minority. Like he is this kind of intolerant minority who's not interested in anything but what he wants. Absolutely does not give a shit where the culture moves or where other, trying to meet others where they are, or do something that's for the collective good. It's only about like his interests and trying to align himself in a way that he can have that. And anything less than that is unacceptable. And of course, it sounds pathological, but this is, in a sense, it makes him perfect as a kind of political creature, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. No, that's something I've been thinking as well. I'm sorry, I have to, just because now's the time and the platform. Regarding Dark Souls and Morcar, I've never seen anyone play Dark Souls and refuse to interact with the game as much as when Morcar did it. And by that I mean, people are like, oh, you read like articles about, people telling other guys to get good at Dark Souls, and it needs a difficulty slider. But it's like, the game is literally made in a way that if you actually care about what's happening, if you just spend 5 minutes and read your stats and read the items and read, all the tweaks and the little configurations you can do to your character, you can beat the game. You tweak the difficulty to your own sort of level. And refusing to engage with the game is the worst thing you can do. And it's like watching a contest of stubbornness when I watched Morcar play that game.
Well, and look, like as someone who's spent a lot of time with the FromSoft games, and is also considers myself particularly stubborn with video games. Like I have 100% beat those games the wrong way. I'm not a particularly like talented gamer, but like there does come a point where you do reach the wall where it's like, okay, maybe the solution to this is not just beating my head into the wall. And like I think the thing
it's
that
like,
people
okay,
find
hang on a minute, this guy is weak to lightning damage. Maybe I should do something about that, right?
Oh yeah, and so like the thing that I think I find satisfying about it is that there is kind of a problem solving aspect to it. It's like, oh, like I'm getting demolished. Like, what can I do to make this easier? Like either I can just get good, put the hours in, which don't get me wrong, I've definitely done, especially when I had more free time. But there's another part where it's like, all right, like let's try something else. And so there's that kind of like power. I mean, it really is like, and this is not a particularly good thing, but it's like the power process that Ted Kaczynski talks about, right? It's like problem, hard work, solution, and when it is obviously not to the most productive end, but it is incredibly satisfying, and so
yeah, I mean, that's why they're so popular, those games, because they allow you to experience that, the depths and the peaks and the valleys, I suppose, of overcoming these challenges so often, right? And with such consistency.
No, definitely. And again, like I'm not some ultra hardcore gamer who like loves just the things that just like beat you down and are like the most difficult.
No,
But
I
it's
don't
not
either.
it's not a concept I don't understand. And I'm not a professional video game reviewer. And so again, this is one of those things where it's like I don't understand how this can be your job. Like all you do in life is analyze this, and you have not picked up on something that's a fairly basic concept. Again, I just do not get it.
I don't know, man. It's
But again, I keep coming back to it. It's like just complete unwillingness to kind of adapt to anything else, and it's like everybody else has to change for me. In a sense, there's like, and for again, if you are a sensible person who will adapt, like that attitude is completely impossible to understand. But like these are the people who sort of become political elites in a sense, because they don't really, you don't have to understand anything, but they just seem to have opinions about everything. And because I mean that's where like apathy becomes a problem. It's sort of a political bottleneck in a sense that you have people who sort of they care about they feel like that's not my area of expertise, so I don't have an opinion on it, and that's a healthy thing. But from a political standpoint, it's really bad actually to not have opinions on stuff. Like you should have opinions on how things should be run and what other people should do at all times. It's something I've actually tried to almost train myself to stop being apathetic, and like if there's something that's going on, I should try to have an opinion, even though I don't want to, because it's, you like, just like you're deboomerizing, you need to kind of like stop being apathetic in that sense. I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but yeah, these are just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I get it. Lumberg says, fat roll for the win. I actually, I am currently playing Elden Ring off and on when I have time. And the first half of that game was my goal was to basically have more, what's it called, like the stance stat that allows you to not be like staggered than any boss I was fighting, so I can just force my way through them. Which is not something I've ever done. Poise, yes, which is not something I've done in any other Dark Souls games. I'm mostly to be like medium or light armor to be able to dodge stuff. But now it's just about being a bigger tank than the asshole I'm fighting. All right, let's keep going.
It's yeah, two quotes. I mean, you could read both of them because they're so short.
Yeah. SSBB religious experience. To say that playing through Subspace Emissary was close to a religious experience for me in general. Link meets Yoshi, Rob stormtroopers, Kirby blowing up Bowser and Ganondorf's giant space cannon. Would be putting it. What does this mean? I don't know what he's talking about here.
This is like Super Smash Brothers, right? And like there you have the crossovers where he's like going all soy jack about.
What
I
is
think that's the main
Subspace
mission.
Emissary?
I think that's the main game.
So the problem is it's just a really poorly constructed phrase. It's badly written, but what he's describing is things that happen in the like campaign mode of Super Smash Brothers Brawl. It's like the like how fighting games.
So he's like soy jacking about Avengers.
But he's not helping you out because it is just a uniquely badly written sentence. Like it's hard.
I see what he means now. Okay. To say that playing through Subspace Emissary was close to a religious experience for me in general. Links meets Yoshi, Rob stormtroopers, Kirby blowing up Bowser, and Ganondorf's giant space cannon would be putting it mildly. But even after that, seeing Mario and Sonic together in a real game, and able to fight one another no less, felt more like real, genuine closure than it had any right to be for a grown man. It sure did, Bob. It sure did.
Yeah, that's like the last significant quote, and the last quote that I put in here is just something that he adds like during the playthrough that I just found particularly like, why would you even put this in here?
That's a sort of funny moment. 2012. I just had a creepy yet utterly banal pre-bedtime moment. A box of cereal I vividly remember opening and eating from a day or so ago is sealed shut. It has never been opened. I'm not sure what this means or implies, either about me or the cereal. Did I hallucinate eating cereal? Of all the things to conjure, why that? And if so, why not a cereal I liked more than Special K red berries? If I was going to dream of cereal, I'd have preferred it to be something more potent like Fruity Pebbles or Blueberry. Whatever. Time to play some of the water levels.
How
much does this cost? This book?
You could check it out. It's probably on sale. I can't imagine it's much more like maybe $10, $12 or something. But you have to order it. Like there's no shop with any sense that's gonna have this stock. So it's like this very niche, internet video game book publisher that you have to buy it from. Of course, you could just get the PDF, right? That's what I did because I had a copy of it. I gave it away to someone else, and I wasn't able to borrow it back, so I just found the PDF, which you can get for free.
Right.
Wait.
I think that's all the quotes we have.
Go back up to the it's like the wizard something.
Oh, the wizard movie. We didn't read the wizard movie.
Yeah, I'm seeing some keywords in there, and before we get out of that, I just want to say that last section is completely insane. And that kind of like weird, train of thought writing. I've been reading some Vonnegut recently. I finally read Slaughterhouse-Five after reading, most of Vonnegut's other work. And he
Are you
will
gonna-
also
Are you
kind of
about
do
to liken Kurt Vonnegut to Moviebob?
only slightly, in the sense that ever since Vonnegut, because Vonnegut's a good writer, but he has this plague of being kind of the accessible literature, because his books are, written in kind of vernacular and they're relatively short. Like a lot of people have read them, and he's really influenced how prose is written, and specifically that weird mix of like kind of like not quite stream of consciousness, but almost just like random details that don't seem important. It's interesting when you see someone who's like a master of English prose do it, because like, okay, you're bending the rules to make a point. But this is like the ultimate debased version of that, where not only does it not even make grammatical sense, but it is literally a pointless story about opening your Goyslop box and have it not be opened in the way you thought it was.
Because I've had the same sort of thought time and time again when reading. I've been promoting Hamsun, and he's credited as one of the guys who sort of promoted that stream of consciousness type of writing, and it reads like one of his earlier works, because then it's very like prototypical, right? And it reads like it's exactly what you're saying, this like strange, overly detailed stream of consciousness writing, but it's about this like weird weed fantasy or whatever he's like delusional video game thing he's doing. I don't know.
Exactly. And the phrase "an odd pre-bedtime ritual" is one of the most disturbing. It's like fragments of a sentence.
I just picture Moviebob before he goes to bed. He has to stop by the kitchen and have a handful of Special K red berries.
Oh, see, I anticipate him eating in bed like an absolute animal.
Oh,
but
yeah, that may be.
Look, I think we put it this way, that there's almost nothing I could find out about Moviebob's personal life that would surprise me. Like just the saddest thing you can think of, he's probably written about that in a positive light in his own autobiography.
Odd.
We lost him again.
No,
Are you still here?
He's back.
It's I have this bad habit of, because I don't have a camera connected to my desktop, I will try to mute myself and accidentally hit the start camera button.
Yeah.
That's my bad. There's no internet problem.
Okay, the Wizard movie. Now, having watched the film much, much more often than it deserves since then, I can likely quote about 80% of it chapter and verse. You got 50,000 points in Double Dragon? I love the power glove. It's so bad. Video Armageddon. He touched my breasts. California. But the climatic reveal of Super Mario Bros. 3 is seared into my memory the way JFK's assassination was for my parents' generation, or the way 9/11 would be for mine a scant 12 years from then. ...
This man literally, nothing has happened to Moviebob. Like he's defined his life around the most.
He's grasping at straws like a madman. Yeah. Wow.
It legitimately is kind of pathetic. And so in much the same way that I think that the Coomer meme, really kind of changed the discussion about like, nofap and like how guys on the internet, related to sexual content, by kind of showing you like, wait a minute, like this is what you become, kind of like showing you your face in the mirror, even in kind of like a silly way. I kind of look at Moviebob like that. Like this is what you could become, like kind of like there, but for the grace of God go I. And in a weird way, like I do find Moviebob pitiable, because this is a really pathetic life. And not just saying that to dunk on him, but like there's a danger.
Looking at it from the outside, it's very sad.
No, it is. And I think that in all of us, just by being like kind of, people of the internet, there is that tendency to escapism, that tendency to like obsession on things that don't really matter. And then you see this man and you're like, oh, I've got to stop. I can't let it get too far or I'll turn out like this. It's very much like
it's like the inner J-man. You have your inner Moviebob.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And so like there's multiple layers to my obsession with him. I don't even say obsession like I know everything about him, but the reason I still kind of follow him around on the internet And that's definitely a big part of it. Just the like, I want to keep him around so I don't become anything like him.
Yeah, Ludwig said it earlier. You can sort of define yourself in opposition to Moviebob.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely perfect. In that sense, he's actually kind of useful, and it's not going to get any better, right? He is 41 now. Is going to be 10 years. Is going to be 50. You know, what else is he going to do? He's just going to keep going down this track that he's always been going down. Every year it gets a little bit more sad than the previous year, so it's going to be funny. Hopefully, it'll be like a cautionary tale for younger men out there.
Yeah, hopefully. Sorry, I was just over at his channel looking at what he's been posting. But he has like 130K subscribers, which isn't bad.
Yeah, but he's been very consistent with putting stuff out there, and I mean, of course, he looks like he's extremely prolific in creating videos. You have to realize that this is like the only thing that he does. He doesn't have a day job, right?
Right.
It's kind of in and he makes more money like working for these reviewing companies than he did with Blockbuster. So, I mean, in the book, it's explained that he lived with his parents until he was 31. And then he was able to move out and find an apartment, but then he kind of lost some of that revenue. It's likely that after that he had to move back in with his parents again and so on.
That must have been like, hang on, because if he moved out at 31 and he got fired from the Escapist because of Gamergate, which was in 2012, so that must have been why he had to move back, because he got fired.
Yeah, at least I think so. It's not explained fully in the book, but I assume that, with the living costs and everything, even though, I mean, he's not living in New York, he lives in Massachusetts, I think. So, I mean, yeah, I don't have that much more to cover from the book, but I mean, I just wanted to know if like he's been up to anything interesting in these last 5 years, because the last time it was significant was during the the Gamergate debacle and like with the Trump election and so on, where people were trying to call him out for debates and stuff, and he actually, he was a little bit more visible on the screen. I mean, of course, he's never going to do debates or anything like that, but that's again one of his like accidentally kind of based political intuitions, just not doing debates, even though it's because you suck. You just kind of realize that it's a complete waste of time to do this stuff. You're just gonna have to stay within the little corner of power that you have and just completely turn every screw you can to target the enemy, and not bother engaging with discussing things or trying to moderate yourself.
Sorry, Jayburn, you sent me what's this? The mouse trapped.
So one of the great things about Moviebob is that he has a special like series for political content or political like kind of related to movies or anything. And it's not like amazingly hilarious, but as I was kind of going through his YouTube channel, I started looking at his thumbnails, and I will occasionally ironically dip my toe in
occasionally.
But this man,
I've seen some of your thumbnails.
Look, I don't do them for real videos, so it's okay. I'm ironically doing something shameless, so you can't make fun of me.
7 arrows.
But there is just something about it that like there's both the sadness of like this is what he's become, but also like I think you're dead right when it comes to like he really hasn't done much since Gamergate, and he's still just kind of churning out these videos, and his channel is just like slowly shrinking and going down to nothing. Like, look, I don't want to say like any of us have like the best YouTube metrics ever, but like this guy's getting despite having okay, fair point, but despite this guy having like over 100,000 subs, like he's barely cracking the 10,000 15,000 viewer mark for like short clickbait videos, which fair enough, like I get it, he's making his money, but like how long can this go on?
Well, knowing the other side of YouTube, I mean, you're not making that much money.
Yeah, you're certainly not making the kind of money you'd want to be in your late 40s. Like at this point, I guess Blockbuster doesn't exist, but you have to start to do the math. Like, are you really coming out on top of this?
Yeah.
And this is quite funny, of course, because you'll see tweets where he talks about himself as being like this coastal elite who It was not affected by globalism or anything like it, because he has like these unique skills that sort of makes him globalism proof, unlike all of these like mid-American hillbillies and so on.
Yeah, he was supposed to be in space by now. Isn't that one of the tweets? Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. 2019. I was supposed to be on a starship by now, conversing with intelligent robots, deciding what sort of body I'd like to upload my immortal consciousness to. Instead, we're all still on this fucking rock, wondering how to placate the white working class. 10th of April 2019. I'll never forgive the troglodytes who stole the future I earned to prolong their worthless existence.
See, this is what I'm saying. Like, where else outside of like a Hollywood movie would you find someone who uses the phrase troglodytes unironically? like if I was going on talking about how the white man had been infiltrated by mongoloids, you'd assume that I was some like, out of time 1920s phrenologist, like this like mustache twirling, like crazy person. But the left-wing version of that still exists. And this is like the funny part of him, which I just think is hilarious, because like any like completely retarded take, just turn the vitriol up like 150%, and Moviebob has 3 of them.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's the thing that I guess like why I kind of keep in touch with him, is that as like it all seems to dwindle, because like look, like everyone knows like YouTube is not a long-term game plan. Like no one makes it past a few years at their peak popularity. But also like generally you don't see people that are this kind of like hateful and spiteful and like useless, and so like there's a part of it that's like what is the ending for Moviebob? And at least in my mind, like I don't know if I want to know, because it's probably not particularly uplifting. It does just seem like he's kind of getting what he wants in a certain way. He's getting all the escapism he wants, and it just seems to be like, it just seems empty. And I don't know, maybe I'm out over my skis here, but that's what I think.
There's just 2 endings. At some point it's going to be state-assisted suicide, or it's going to be the degenerates like you belong on the cross ending, and
Heart attack.
Or heart attack.
I think that's probably
I would file that
likely
under the state-assisted suicide.
Yeah, it's going to be that, or he can't pay for his diabetes medication, something like that. That's what I think is going to happen. But I mean, you talk about like his ending is sad, like his entire existence has just been sad, right? So, but in he has done much better than he deserves. That's really what I think, because he's aligned himself, politically well. I mean, he's probably benefited from student loan forgiveness. I remember reading tweets where he was just gloating about it nonstop, right? And he thinks that he's going to get another $100,000 student loan forgiveness for his film degree, and so on, that he probably still hasn't paid back.
So this is to slightly take it into a different direction. I keep hearing things that's been declared unconstitutional. I don't know if that's true or not, because my sources for that are Telegram and Twitter, the 2 least reliable sources of news. But I do think that if that turns out to be true, if the student loan forgiveness gets struck down, would that not be the biggest irony in the world? That Biden basically bought all these votes, and he bought it with a check that bounced. It's almost like it would be like the perfect irony.
Yeah, it would be great. I'm just not holding my breath for it. I don't even understand kind of the legal ramifications of it, but I've heard the same things, not just from Telegram, but I think Jonah Goldberg was on Sam Harris' podcast and talked about the unconstitutionality about it. And I guess, he's one of these kind of like center-right cucks like David French, but at least these people kind of know their laws. So I assume there's some credibility to that.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at Moviebob tweets at this point. I mean, the dating on this, something happened, with Trump that really sent him. I mean, he really has the, what's it called, the TDS for quite a while.
But I think he was very cuckoo before that even happened, right? He was always sure that wasn't going to happen. He was, braced for Hillary Clinton, so I assume he's, pissed about it. But I mean, his kind of heel turn was with the Gamergate stuff, right? Because before the Gamergate, and he had to kind of pick a side on it, he described himself as like this kind of like left libertarian, libertine guy, where I kind of enjoy my Japanese like waifu video games and so on. But like with the Anita Sarkeesian and the simping, he kind of had to take their side because they are kind of in this journalism clique, in a sense, like these people who don't actually play games but have opinions on games, and through that are somehow able to dictate, where the discussion is going to go and what kind of games are going to be produced, even though they're not going to play
have sex
them.
with the guys who make the games.
Oh yeah.
I just like that he censored Gamergate in this tweet.
Not just once, but twice. Like he really couldn't put. Like, I don't know. That's one of like the weird ticks of lefty Twitter. Is censoring something. And look, like I get it if you're trying to avoid like the algorithm, but at a certain point, like I don't know, it just seems a little bit childish. Which I guess, look, we're talking about Cinema Roberto here, but it is just an odd, like I guess, like tick that apparently has been around for longer than I thought.
Yeah, the vitriol is high on this one as well. I mean, I don't know how do you think he thinks of himself as white? Maybe because he's Italian, he's sort of like, that's kind of a bit of a gray area there. So I always wondered about that because, I mean, I would think that he is a white guy, right? His brother is white, his brother's wife is white, and their children are white, and so on. And sitting and talking about this kind of stuff.
I would have to see some DNA evidence. I mean, it's
perhaps
I
think
heavily Moorish influence.
But I mean, I think if in that kind of political divide in the United States, and like I don't want to sound like a lefty, but the concept of whiteness in itself, that it's exists, in the American context, where there's like this division between the European and the African, in a sense, or the kind of Latin American population, where like the term white is defined in that sense. And I think that, like, if you ask a black guy if Moviebob is white, I think the answer is very clearly yes. Or if he goes to prison, he's going to be in the white gang. But I don't know if that's something that he thinks about at all. Or he just kind of, he can say so many things about white people.
That's actually
because
a pretty good like thought experiment to place people in, like to get people to place themselves, like which gang would you be in prison? I just stumbled over this when I searched for Moviebob tweets, and I just wanted to show everyone this.
Is that real?
It seems real.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
Hello, fellow kids. How are you doing?
Turn on your cringe inhibitors, folks. It's pretty rough.
I can't imagine that world of memes and COVID existing in the same world. Like impact font, Nicolas Cage, like the whole phrasing of it, like all of it is just like, this is like, to me, it's like that's the meme language of like 2011, like 10 years ago. And look, like on the internet, time moves incredibly quickly. Like that just is like, it's an incredible anachronism. It's like if you walk downtown, when you saw a guy in, full medieval armor, practically just the internet version.
Yeah, it's pretty much
does
that,
not make sense in this context. Hashtag too, like, geez, what is this?
Yeah, what's the quote? I mean, the right decision made too late is the wrong decision, right? And that's what you're seeing here with these. They look dated. The hashtag LOL, and he's got 3 laughing, crying faces and so on. They put the watermark on there. Honestly, I hate this shit. I hate people who put fucking watermarks on memes. Like you went to meme generator and you just put like text bottom, text top in there, and then they have to put the stamp on it like it's some like it's some kind of copyrighted
property, Luddic Path.
Yeah,
it's their
we
meme.
own this now. There's no open sourcing anymore. Like we own this meme now. This kind of shitty meme, but yeah.
Oh, so I see in chat talking about Bob Chipman in prison. The point is, I forgot about this, that he defended the Cuties movie hard. Like he really, swung for it. And Zio Golden chat, if Moviebob was in prison, he'd have to be in solitary because we know what happens to guys like him. Yeah, pretty much. Which I think,
Right, 'cause
I
he
think the
had
idea that
cuties,
Moviebob is allowed into a prison gang, like even the even the neo-Nazi prison gangs have standards.
Well,
Let me see
yeah,
if I can
actually,
find
that's quite
cuties.
realistic. But I still like the prison gang thought experiment. It's usually kind of my standard rebuttal to the kind of when you get into the sort of race topics, right? And the people ask you, well, what does it mean to be white? How do you define white? I just say that, okay, we can just get a panel like from like 5 low IQ, high security prisoners of like various races, and they'll just tell you which gang they would have fit into, and then you know. I mean, it's
so
not
weird
complicated.
how like weirdly good his takes are if you like employ a bit of horseshoe theory to his to his tweeting. They're absolutely insane, but it's like, man, imagine if he actually meant it.
I hadn't seen that mutant one, but I have a feeling Yiz would not have a problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just rearrange some words, put in a couple of others, and that's basically a mold bug piece.
Yeah. If we just get him writing about dark elves, we'd probably get something pretty similar.
Oh man. All right. Do we want to keep looking at Moviebob tweets, or should we call it a night?
I might be done. Like I said, I got off a 10-hour shift and went straight into this stream, so I need to eat food, or else I'll waste
you
away.
need to, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're past like 12.
It's
12
almost
o'clock here, right? So, but
here,
I mean, we could start rounding off. Maybe, I mean, there's some super chats. Are there any questions we should answer before we call it a day?
Get in your questions now before we leave.
I will say I managed to not talk quite as much as last time. Like we didn't go a full 4 hours, and I consider that a success, right?
Right. No, I mean, we're all about the long form content here, so there's no worries. Yeah, I mean, we just started a bit later than usual today, so.
Yeah, what kind of asshole would be late to this stream?
Yeah, some weirdo in a different time zone. I suspect.
I will say, and this is completely off topic, but starting this job and working a more like I've done a lot of blue collar jobs before, but most of them have been kind of very independent. So like, hey, go fix this thing. Come back when you're done. But in a more like regimented factory job, the type of people that are attracted to that job are let's just put it this way, are highly diverse. And so if you've seen some postings about that on my Twitter, that's why. And kind of comparing the Anglo Ortho version of race, with me, walking around this factory floor and kind of seeing to use a leftist term, the lived reality, is a very distinct, a very, very distinct contrast. That there's a very little relation between kind of like the Pacific Northwest, like ultra lib version of what diverse society is like, and actually living in one.
So there's no fruitful negotiation going on between white and black in the storage facility.
The Amazon warehouses.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. There's so much cultural interchange that we have armed police at every shift change.
Jesus Christ!
Just to prepare us, to protect us from the people who don't understand how fruitful the interplay can be.
Yeah, it's reality is sadly a lot scarier than the leftists online would have you believe.
So is this a Moviebob meme that he made?
I don't know. These are just like random shitty things that like show up when I Google Moviebob tweets. I don't know why they're related, but I just found it kind of funny.
Who is that?
I think it's
who is that next to Alex Jones?
I remember her face, but I don't remember her name.
No, I'm the exact same thing. I like this is again another artifact from another internet, but I don't remember who that is. I don't remember the name or why I know that face.
Maybe someone in chat remembers. But actually, we should probably just end it for tonight. Getting really tired, actually. So thank you all for watching and hanging out with us. And Jay Burden, do you have anything you want to tell us about? Anything coming up before we leave?
No, so there's obviously just my my normal podcast. I try to get out a couple episodes a week where I interview people across our spheres. I don't have anything confirmed. There are people I'm in talks with, but you can kind of look at my backlog. I recently talked to AA. I recently talked to Black Horse from the Radlib streams, and also a smaller channel that I want to shill, Witticism TV, who does great video essays. Recently talked to all those guys. I've got a pretty deep backlog. So if you enjoyed what I had to say, feel free to head over there. My links should be in the description. And for my YouTube channel, you can find me elsewhere. And if for some reason, you're mentally damaged, you can join my Telegram, where we talk about apparently nothing but, horny posting, race mixing, and, whatever else it happens to come up. And again, like I said, thank you guys for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming on. It's, it's always a pleasure. Luddic Path, you have your channel if anyone wants to join the memeplex.
Yes, so yeah, new movies coming out. New memes coming out soon. And yeah, I don't really have anything to add. It's going to be good to go to bed right now. I'm quite tired.
Yeah, same. Remember, everyone, to smash that like button for the algorithm. And I don't have anything confirmed right now for next week. But I mean, I'll advertise it when it gets close. And I think with that, we'll bid you all a good night, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.